Good evening, everyone. I call to order the meeting of the Victoria City Council for Monday, April 27th at 6:30 p.m. We are starting just a few minutes late because our workshop ran over. With that, the first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. With that, we have a number of announcements, but before we do that, Dana, if you want to step up to the mic and let the public know some of the housekeeping items, if you will.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council, and members of the public who are joining us this evening, perhaps for your first time. So welcome and thank you for tuning in tonight. We value our residents and our community members, and even though our doors are temporarily closed to protect you all, we want to make sure that anyone who wants to submit comments for our meeting can do so. State statutes allow the city to conduct meetings by telephone, and the council recently took action to allow our city council and also our committee and commission meetings temporarily take place remotely during this pandemic emergency. We have temporarily modified how we conduct our open forum section of our agenda. We are asking that all open forum items be sent to the council electronically via email or online through our form by noon the day of the meeting. That online form can be found on the City of Victoria's website under Meeting Participation heading, or you can email our city clerk, and her email is cpatnode, cpatnode@ci.victoria.mn.us. Her email can also be found online. Please note that in the event of a public hearing, we intend to provide the ability for those wishing to comment via conference call. Tonight's meeting does not include any public hearing, so we have not provided a dial-in number. Those of you watching us online or on Mediacom Channel 8, please be aware of the following. Some or all of our city council members, some in this case, we have two that are present tonight, and the rest are on joining us remotely, are participating remotely. So we are broadcasting this meeting live and recording it so it can be watched on demand later. There is up to a 1-minute delay from the live meeting to the online and Google broadcast. And then finally, different from our usual process, all actions of the council will be taken by roll call vote. This process is new for all of us. We thank you for your patience and your constructive feedback as we work through this unprecedented situation. We are working hard to ensure your voice can still be heard while we maintain everyone's health and safety. Thank you, Council.
All right, thank you, Dana. I have a number of announcements. First off, we have a number of workshops coming up over the next several weeks. On Monday, May 11th at 5:30, there'll be a workshop to discuss the city's facility space needs assessment. The City Council will also be holding a workshop on Tuesday, May 26th at 5:30 to review the city's water and sewer utility rate study. This meeting is being held on Tuesday because city offices are closed on Monday, May 25th in observance of Memorial Day. On Monday, June 8th at 5 p.m., there will be a City Council workshop to review a revised shoreland management ordinance. Staff will also be providing an update on the city-owned 13.5-acre development project, commonly referred to as Downtown West. And finally, we'll be kicking off our 2021 budget process on Monday, June 22nd. City Council will be holding a preliminary budget review discussion at 5:30 p.m. All workshops will take place in the council chambers here at City Hall. And then given the current health pandemic, some or all of the members of the council will participate in the workshop discussions remotely as we have been doing. The public is invited to watch live online or on Mediacom Channel 8. Also, the city is planning to host a 2-day residential yard waste collection event on Saturday, May 30th and Sunday, May 31st from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. The event will take place in the same location as the fall yard waste event at the city's old public works site, just east of City Hall on Stieger Lake Lane. Yard waste collection is free and will be open to all residents of Victoria. We ask that you please bring your utility bill or driver's license to prove residency. We're also seeking volunteers to help direct traffic and check licenses. No lifting is required. We'll be following social distancing guidelines as part of this process also. Please call City Hall for more information or to sign up to volunteer. Without volunteers, we won't be able to hold the event. With that, Dana, is there any other announcements?
Staff, Mayor.
All right, thank you. With that, I'd ask the council, can I get a motion, please, to adopt the final agenda?
Rick Millen makes a motion to adopt the final agenda.
Thank you. Can I get a second, please?
Councilmember Black, second.
Thank you. Any changes, Dana? No? Council members, any changes? Hearing none, roll call vote. Judy, would you roll call vote, please? Yea or nay? Aye, thank you. Councilmember Gregory?
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Vogt? Oh, we can't hear you. Is he muted?
Councilmember votes aye.
There you go. Got it. Thank you. Deb?
Aye.
Mayor votes aye. The final agenda is adopted with no changes. Thank you, Council. With that, consent agenda. Can I get
Open forum.
oh, I'm sorry. Geez, yeah, I apologize. We skipped the open forum, so we're going to go back. We did finish the item 5, so we're going to go back to open forum. My apologies. We do have an item for open forum. 4.1 Carver County Health and Human Services Overview, presentation by Dr. Richard Scott, the Deputy Division Director. Do we have him on the line? Dr. Scott?
Yes, I am here.
Yeah, my apologies. I'm sorry I missed that. With that, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Mayor and City Council and all those who are joining us remotely. I appreciate this opportunity to update the Council on our current status with the COVID-19, the process, and also to talk a little bit about the science behind our decisions for a phased reopening of activities. So I know that I have a short time here. I'm going to go through some of my slides fairly quickly. Obviously provide an opportunity for questions and answers at the end. A few of the slides I might take a little bit more time to elaborate on. I did add a couple of slides from the one I presented or sent to you earlier this morning, but I didn't delete anything. But I thought I did find some that might provide a little greater clarity because of the use of graphics. So hopefully that will aid in the presentation. So just moving along and making sure all of my electronics works. Here we go. I think people have been following that we have a steady increase in COVID-19 cases. We anticipate a significant more cases as we ramp up testing. Carver County has now 17 confirmed cases. We anticipate that it could be anywhere from 10 to 100 times more than that. But those are people that may not necessarily have had a chance to get tested or were unable to get tested. But that number just went up a couple. But again, you may recall that Carver County was the second county in Minnesota to experience a case. We had the second case in Minnesota. And so we've only gone from, our first case on the 8th of March to 17. And of course, while the state has gone from none to 3,600. So we're doing pretty well as far as that's concerned. I think our strategies are proving to be effective. The next one that's a little bit more troubling is the number of deaths. This is from yesterday. We actually had 14 more deaths today. Yesterday, though, the deaths were twice as many as they were a week before. So, of course, that is really concerning to us. Carver County, fortunately, had 0 deaths. About almost 78% of the deaths have been associated with long-term care. And we in Carver County have been fortunate that none of our long-term care facilities have reported any confirmed diagnosis of COVID-19. We don't know if that's totally luck or not, but I like to think it was that we were very proactive in outreaching to our long-term care facilities. We made sure that they had adequate personal protective equipment from the very beginning. We maintain regular contact with them at a minimum of once a week. One of our staff nurses has a very strong history in working with long-term care facilities, understands rules, regulations. She was actually an auditor for the state for long-term care. So she's been a great resource to them. So we've made sure that their protocols have been in place and they've been abiding by them early on. And so I really strongly believe that that has kept our residents of long-term care facilities much safer than what might be experiencing elsewhere. This next slide you see right now is the hospitalization. While it's unclear, we can use cases to really understand what's going on because we have not had an opportunity to ramp up our testing. But as far as the number of hospitalizations, and especially ICU, that is a pretty good predictor of where we're at. And you can see from the graphic that we've had a steady increase, but the rate of increase has not increased. So it's kind of, we feel that that's sort of maybe the beginning of the slowing down of our cases. It's hard to know for sure, but that is a very positive sign that we haven't seen a significant increase in the hospitalization. And according to the Jan Malcolm, the health commissioner, she just reported earlier today that this is well within our capacity to meet the need, which is a very positive thing indeed. This is the breakout of those who have cases. And as I had mentioned, the largest segment is coming from congregate care, and about 78% of the deaths are associated from long-term care. You're probably familiar with this classic curve, the pandemic curve. I wanted you just to keep a note of the stages from containment to community mitigation, pandemic management, then demobilization, because as we prepare to reopen our economy, we're going to follow a reverse order of that for the most part as far as our strategies. And while we don't know for sure where we're at right now, our best guess is that we're still below the curve, the top of the curve, but we're rapidly approaching that. Again, our primary goal has always been to protect the health and safety of our staff, clients, healthcare providers, first responders, and of course, our general public. Our secondary goals then have been slowing the spread of this disease so we can really ramp up in order to provide our essential services and PPE testing and our supply chain capacity. And that way, as people do get sick, our healthcare facility is able to handle those cases without overloading the system. Our secondary goal now, more recently, is to begin to plan and prepare for reopening the economy and easing some of the community mitigation policies. What are we doing now? It's pretty much the same as we have been for the last several weeks, so I won't elaborate on this, but we're continuing to maintain our unified command in our Emergency Operations Center and doing what we can to work with our collaborating partners on our strategies. So preparing for the new normal. What are some things? I'd like to start off first by just some reason for caution. A quote by Dr. Tom Frieden, who was one of the previous directors of CDC, who was also the health officer in New York several years back. And he says the measures that we've taken so far won't protect us from the virus. These measures aren't a cure, but they have bought us some time so that we can prepare for our next phase. It's also important to know that we will not be able to return to the way things were as long as people lack immunity to COVID-19 virus. And the best way to achieve that immunity is going to be through the use of vaccinations. And while we're hopeful that we will speed up the process, most experts still think that we're anywhere from 12 to 18 months out from getting a viable vaccine that will be available for the general public. So we're in this still for the long haul. Hopefully, as we gain more information, we can be more targeted in our approach and that we can allow for those businesses and activities that pose less risk to start to resume activities again. But if we resume some of our quote unquote normal activities too soon, we do run the risk of a second wave of pandemic, and history has shown that to be the case. So we do need to be cautious as we move forward. So what is really needed in order for us to establish that new normal? Basically, there's three things that I think it boils down to. We need to have good, reliable, accurate, and timely data. And that is from understanding who has it, how does it spread, what strategies seem to really work to contain it, and how can we protect our more vulnerable and all of us from the disease. And we're not at a point fully, we're not there yet. We definitely need to ramp up our testing, both with our diagnostic testing, PCR testing as well as our serology testing. Secondly, we need to have a robust capacity to address both our current needs and contingency plans in the event of a resurgence. And what that means is that our hospitals need to be able to provide for all of their patients, not just COVID patients. Because as you know, many of the elective surgeries or elective procedures have been either canceled or postponed. We need to have the ability to provide for those care again before we really begin to significantly change our strategies. And then finally, obviously, we need to have clear, comprehensive, adaptable, scalable, and enforceable plans. So what does that really mean? If you look at both our overall public health, we look at what we're doing with social distancing, and obviously being very mindful of our well-being, both psychological and economic. What things do we need to be mindful of? And basically under public health is what does impact the spread of disease? So any activities or decisions we make, how is that going to impact on the disease? That's something that we need to ask. Secondly, how prepared are we to test and isolate those that are exposed? The value of widespread testing is that we'll have a better understanding of where the disease is so that we can catch those who have it sooner. We can do contact tracing of those people that have been exposed to, reach out to them, and then ask them or quarantine early in the process so they're not going to contribute to community spread. As you may remember from that curve, the pandemic curve, early in the epidemic or early in an outbreak, we primarily focus on containment, because if we're good there and we can catch those people early, they're never going to be in a position to spread it in the community. Unfortunately, as we learn more about this new virus, we realized that its communicability was probably greater than we had originally thought. And also now with understanding that people may even spread it without having symptoms, it was difficult to know who had it. So we have to have that widespread testing to catch people soon, find out who they contact, have all of them in isolation and quarantine, and then we can reduce the spread in the community. At that point, the rest of us can get back to business more as usual. Also, as I mentioned earlier, are our hospitals prepared to treat all patients? And then how does this impact the health of non-COVID-19 illnesses? The second then is social distancing. So as we begin to reopen our businesses, can we be assured that the social distance went with that new action? One of the biggest distinctions is that if you have control over the behavior of your customers or clients. So for an example, like the county is going to be slowly, well, we'll see. We're hoping to slowly move into being able to see our residents and our clients on a face-to-face basis if necessary, but by appointment. That way we can have a little bit more control over the contact. We can make sure that the clients aren't actively sick. We can also instruct them to wear a cloth mask, and our staff will do the same. And we can be a little bit more strategic on the frequency and the total number of people we see at a certain time. That way we can assure that those social distances are maintained. If on the other hand, you have a business that everybody can come all at once and you can't control that behavior, then you're compromising that social distance, running the risk of that spread. The other thing you need to be mindful of, you have the necessary supplies to keep workers and customers safe. And this has been our challenge early on in the outbreak. We just have not had sufficient personal protective equipment to keep us all safe. So we've had to modify and prioritize the use of those supplies for those critical areas. If we have enough high quality masks, if we have enough hand disinfectants, if we have enough cleaning supplies, if we have enough of all those things, we could all be donned with that and we would not be here in this situation. So that as we kind of kept that curve down, however, hopefully our manufacturers, our nonprofits have even making cloth masks have helped us kind of hopefully start to restock those protective equipment. The other thing to consider is how big is the gathering and as they're safe. And again, reducing that total number who may be exposed. And then are the setting predictable and will people follow the guidelines? And that's what I was alluding to about being able to do things by appointment versus just opening the door. And then finally, of course, is our well-being. We clearly have realized from the very beginning that any actions we take have its social consequences. This pandemic and our strategies to contain it has not been easy on any of us. And so that's something we always need to be mindful. So as we begin to sort of consider a new normal and reopening economy, we need to ask is, will this action actually help the economy, or is it just window dressing? And let's focus on those things that have the greatest good. Promote mental health and well-being. That's often been a consideration for having access to parks and playgrounds, and more recently now golf courses. Does it encourage positive civic engagement? So the strategies that you folks have taken to have the public engage with the council, get their voice heard, has been wonderful. And as we begin to maybe relax some of the restrictions, is that really an area to enhance that positive civic engagement? And finally, does our actions actually have a meaningfully improve the lives of those that have been disproportionately affected? Clearly, those that are more vulnerable, clearly those that have not had a voice as much in social engagement, they have been disproportionately impacted by this. And so we need to consider what strategy we can do to allow them to become more involved. So basically, what are the phases that we consider? And I'm going to go through these relatively quick because I want to allow time for questions. But phase one, which is the continuing the slowing the spread of the disease, really is just continuing to implement what we already have. But on top of that, making sure we have increased testing and early detection capability, obviously continue to ramp up our healthcare capacity, and make sure that we are instituting those practices that allow our vulnerable populations to be safe. As we begin to ramp up our reopening, which is we call phase two, we want first all those other things to be in place, and then we want to be able to show a sustained reduction in cases for at least 14 days. Because anything that's happening now with cases is basically based on the strategies that we did 2 weeks ago because of the incubation period. Now, it may be a while before we have sufficient cases, but we can also look at the number of hospitalizations and ICUs. That's a fairly good predictor that things might be easing if we see those things begin to go down. The other thing we want to do is gradual reopening of businesses and events. And again, as I mentioned before, they will follow sort of the reverse order as we did when we geared up for this pandemic. The next thing is that early detection through asymptomatic sentinel surveillance. Not only do we want to test those who have positive symptoms, but we also eventually want to be able to use kind of a sampling, a surveillance system, so we can test other people who may not be actively showing symptoms, but may have the disease. That way we'll have a better sense of the prevalence of the disease in our community. And then, of course, that will also allow us to do a better job of monitoring for rebound of cases. If we're able to meet all of those things and things continue to progress without any evidence of rebounding, we can continue to lift more of those restrictions, hopefully getting to a point where we lift most restrictions. But that won't really be able to happen until we have a wide availability of both safe and effective therapeutics and or that vaccine. Again, that early detection system through the asymptomatic sentinel surveillance. But at that point, we can have continued relaxation of physical distancing and those other strategies, but always making sure that we are special attention to our vulnerable populations. And then the fourth phase is make sure that we do a good job of preparing for the next pandemic, which again, most people feel is inevitable. When, we don't know, but hopefully we'll be better prepared for the next one so that we can respond quicker and contain it earlier and not have to institute some of these more draconian community mitigation strategies. So here's sort of a nice graphic that the Minnesota Department of Health and Health and Human Services, and I think Dean probably was also involved in here, that's safely adjusting the dials that allows for that concept of gradual reopening. As you can see in the workplace on the left-hand side, let's start with those areas that are critical services, office, industrial settings now what the governor has alluded to, because those don't involve direct face-to-face customer interaction. You have more control over safety of your staff with those social distancing and use of protective equipment. And then curbside pickup was the next one, single shops, and then eventually malls would be probably the last things that open because you can't predict the behavior as well in those big areas. Again, the same principle applies for social gatherings. We can see, families being able to have gatherings again. We can see more weddings allowing more face-to-face with other important things like funerals, worship facilities, but sporting venues and concerts would probably be the last thing we would feel comfortable. And then, as you know, the governor has has maintained the closure of schools, or maintained, I should say, distance learning for schools. And again, hopefully we can begin to see that ramp back up as those other things are in place. So I know that was quick presentation of just sort of the basic principles that are guiding our decision making as we sort of ramp up to a new normal and a phased in reopening. But I'd like to see if you have any questions or concerns that I could address at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Scott. Let me first ask the council members on the phone, questions, comments. Anybody have anything?
This is Councilmember
Judy
Vogt.
Blackstone.
I've got a comment question.
Go ahead.
Did I barge in front of Judy?
That's okay.
Yeah.
I'll continue. Well, first of all, I really appreciate the medical services I get in Carver County. But I have a friend I talked to today at length who's in his mid-70s, and he has a lot of risk factors, heart disease, and a bunch of other things. And he started showing COVID-like symptoms late last week, Thursday, Friday, somewhere in there. They were all the classic ones they tell you to look out for. So he called a couple different places in Carver County to get tested for it. And basically, they gave him the questions, what are your symptoms? And basically, he was told, I don't think he misunderstood it, that there's no place in Carver County you can get a test today. And he verified it. He went out on the state's website and looked at it showed all locations where you can get COVID-19 tests. He keyed in Carver County, there's nothing. I talked to a person at Ridgeview Medical Center and Lakeview, and I talked to someone at a Ridgeview clinic, and they confirmed that you cannot just request a test, with classic symptoms and risk factors in Carver County. You need to go outside the county, and they recommend it going to Shakopee or Minnetonka. So I was kind of like, that's not a big problem for most of us, but I was kind of taken aback. So, whether this is just outpatient testing or whether it's all testing, I don't know. But can you comment on that, Dr. Scott?
Sure. Is this Councilman Voigt?
Councilman Member Vogt.
Vogt. Sorry, my mistake. My bad. Yes, well, I appreciate you bringing that up because as you may recall, Carver County was one of the first counties to partner with their hospital to offer drive-through testing. Mayo was doing it, a few others were doing it, but we were the first county-based collaborative to offer that drive-through testing. And the first day, without any kind of major marketing, we had about 58 tests that were conducted. The next day, we were up to that amount within the first couple of hours. And then by noon, we got the call from MDH with a stop and desist order because they were no longer able to process the tests. And so since that time, testing has been directed to the higher priority areas. So right now, the hospital, Ridgeview Medical, is doing some testing for their critical patients, but they're not doing general testing. And the clinics have not been really in a position to do a whole lot of testing until more recently. So the locations that you found on the governor's website, those were sites that currently have the capacity or are in the process of having the capacity to do those tests. Believe me, we've had many conversations and even had an outreach to Ridgeview Medical Center today to explore the option of being able to provide those tests. We hope that one of our clinics will be offering that soon. And our intention is to offer that as well. So hopefully within the next couple of weeks, we will have some other options as well. Because you're right, right now, there isn't any quote unquote public testing available. And part of that just because a lot of these test results have just become available with the partnership of University of Minnesota working with Mayo to get that done. But hopefully in a couple of weeks, we'll have that.
Okay, so he heard correctly.
He did hear correctly. If he would have been experiencing any shortness of breath or severe difficulties and he went to the emergency room and he was going to be hospitalized, he would have been tested then. But that's where the tests are being reserved for those more critical patients and or critical healthcare providers who are caring for those patients. But hopefully that needs to change. Yep. Thank you. Good question.
Yep.
Judy, go ahead.
Okay, I just had a question on the dial as to what was going to be opening when and how it's going to go. If the last one is going to open from the first one that got closed. I'm trying to get an idea of about our restaurants, our bars, our salons, our stores. That how is that going to be laid out? Are they going to be stage 2, stage 3, final stage?
Yeah, Councilwoman Black, it's a good question. Obviously, we will be needing to work with the governor and the Commissioner of Health as they sort of lay that out. As you know, with one of his most recent executive orders, manufacturing, light industry, and office facilities that don't have face-to-face encounters with customers are opening as of today. And the reason for that is that there's a much higher level of predictability on controlling for social distancing and the use of appropriate personal protective strategies. So whether that be making sure that workers are not coming to work sick, making sure they have social distancing, make sure they have appropriate cloth face coverings, they have other areas that they can provide that protection. Businesses that require involvement with the public, especially if it's non-appointment based, that's harder to predict, and therefore you run the risk of at least the customers may be contaminating each other if they're not maintaining those distances. Obviously, staff could always choose to wear more protective equipment, but what's protecting customers from each other if they choose not to wear cloth mask coverings? So that's part of the concern. The more control we have, the more information we have, the more we're going to have those businesses and activities open up. The less control we have, the less that we have to rely on people to make those choices and behavior, the longer it's going to take. And again, also the greater the grouping of people, where you have a greater risk of more exposure, obviously those would be later. While I can't tell you exactly when the governor is going to decide to allow those other businesses to open, I know essential services, of which government services are, we are beginning to open up allowing appointment only, and then that will allow us an opportunity to interview clients before they come in, make sure they don't come in if they're sick, ask them to don a cloth mask before they come in, or we can provide them one. And then we've also set up, face shields and a few other places so we can limit the contact with our customers. Hopefully, eventually, we'll be able to just open the doors, but at that point, we run the risk of them, waiting in the lobby, all that kind of stuff. So it will be gradual, and the more we can assure the protection of people, the more we'll be able to open up our services. If we're not careful about that, we do run the risk of a second wave, and I alluded to that in the presentation, and that's a very real risk. History has always shown that to be the case. Fortunately for Minnesota and Minneapolis area, I know that when they looked at the Spanish flu, Minneapolis had one of the lowest secondary curves because they maintained their social distance strategies longer than some of the other cities that opened too soon and had significant secondary concerns. The more data we get, the more we get that timely and relevant, the more protective equipment and capacity we have, and the better our plans, we definitely can begin to reopen faster than later, or sooner than later.
So, but is it going to be, is it going to be, we have to wait 2 weeks for each opening to see how that comes up?
Well, in theory, yes. In reality, because we're always looking at the data, we're always looking at the impact, we're always looking at, well, can we fine tune it a little bit more without compromising risk? It wouldn't necessarily have to wait a full 2 weeks. But generally speaking, the value of the 2 weeks, as I alluded to earlier, is that we have a way of testing what we're doing. Is that causing a rebound, or are we maintaining? And if we're maintaining or getting better, then we can gradually open more and more. But if we have high level of confidence because we have better data, then we could probably shorten that time frame to start reopening.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Gregory?
Yes, thank you. Dr. Scott, thank you for being here. I appreciate this. I know the time frame here is getting a little long, but okay, just checking. Now, as you said, 78% of all the fatalities in Minnesota have happened in long-term care facilities. Long-term care facility can be anywhere from a small group home to a very large nursing home. When one of these cases happens to pop up in a long-term care facility, the care facility has to care for that resident. They don't have an option to move that resident to possibly a more secure facility. Many of these smaller facilities don't have the expertise, the equipment, or the facility itself to be able to adequately care for these residents. And I think once you force a facility to care for a COVID patient, it's just going to run through that facility just like wildfire. And I feel like the governments, both state and federal, have dropped the ball as far as not removing those patients, putting them into a facility that has more of an expertise to care for those patients, to isolate them better. Unless we do that, we're going to continue to lose all of our seniors.
Well, you bring up a really good concern, Council Gregory. Yeah, and that is part of the challenge is that capacity to provide those alternative spaces where we then can maintain a better ability to keep those that are potentially healthy away from those that are potentially ill, so we don't run the risk of spread. Clearly, the better we can support long-term care facilities with policies, procedures, making sure that they have adequate staff, the staff that show up aren't sick themselves, making sure they have quality personal protective equipment, including masks, face shields, gowns, and gloves as necessary, and they're taught on how to use that equipment properly. That can go a long way in keeping the sick people contained and healthy, safe, and then prevent the spread to those that currently do not have the disease. But it's hard when some communities don't have those resources available. You're right. And so hopefully one of the lessons that we're learning from this process, and part of what we call Phase 4, is making sure we're preparing for this in the future so that we can do a better job and respond more quickly and provide alternative care sites for people that are recovering from COVID, and allow the other sites to continue to care for people who don't have COVID but have other concerns. Absolutely. You bring a really good point up.
No, I agree. But even in it's my understanding, in many hospitals, only staff is designated to care for just COVID patients. Most long-term care facilities can't do that. They're gowning up, taking care of a COVID patient, going right next door to someone who doesn't have COVID, and that's why we're losing all our seniors. It's just not a workable plan.
It's tragic. I know one of the things that we're trying to do is to expand that would be available to work in long-term care facilities, partly to address this issue. So I know that there's been a call sent out. I just got another email from the Minnesota Board of Nursing asking people to consider. That could be recently retired, it could be students, anyone who's willing to lend a hand, and their targeted focus is going to be primarily long-term care. I know there's been some conversation that temporarily there's some actually healthcare workers that are furloughed because of the elimination of elective surgeries or elective procedures to prepare for COVID-19, but they come back until their hospitals are busy with other patients again to help out. So there's been an attempt to try to recruit personnel. The challenge with long-term care is that turnover is always so high. Pay historically has been low, and people who often get jobs there, unless they have a real natural couple, often looking for the next best job. That's tough.
Okay, thank you, though.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Deb.
No, I don't have any additional comments, just my thanks and gratitude to the group that's working on this and keeping us safe. Thank you.
All right, thanks. I have no additional comments. Dr. Scott, thank you very much for your time. With that, let's continue on. There's no other, Dana, there's no other open forum items?
No other.
Okay.
There were, I'm sorry, this is Cindy. There were 2 people that sent stuff for the open forum, but they were for
Right,
specific.
7.2 and 7.3, and I'll read those when we get to those agenda items.
Okay, but just to let the people know that did sign that, or send them, that will be coming up then during the discussion.
Good point. Thank you, Cindy. Yeah, Julie Smig did send something in for item 7.3, and I have that, and we'll read that in when we get there. And also Josh and Jen Mulvihill sent in an item for 7.2, and I'll read that in when we get to those items. So thank you for correcting me, Cindy. With that, Council, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda, please?
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda. This is Judy.
Thank you, Judy. Can I get a second, please?
Councilmember Gregory, seconds.
Thank you. Any discussion? Anybody want to remove anything?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Deb wants to remove. Go ahead. What item?
I would like to remove item 6.6, liquor licenses in the city of Victoria.
Okay. Judy, did you want to remove something or the same item?
Same thing.
Okay. I move we modify the valid motion to remove 6.6. Can I get a second on that?
Second, McMillan.
Deb, second that. So we've got 2 votes. First vote is to approve the modified motion. Deb?
Yeah, what I'd like to do.
I got to approve the motion.
Aye.
Thank you. Judy?
Aye.
Vote. Thank you. Councilmember Gregory?
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Vogt?
There you go.
Did we?
Okay, I vote aye. Can you hear me?
Thank you.
Yep.
Yep, we got you now. I vote aye also, so we've got a valid motion now to approve a modified consent agenda. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, roll call vote to approve the modified consent agenda that removes item 6.6. Roll call vote. Judy?
Aye.
Thank you, Councilmember Gregory.
Aye.
Thank you, Councilmember Vogt.
Aye.
Thank you, Deb.
Aye.
Mayor votes aye, so we have approved a modified consent agenda. With that, we'll now pick up item 6.6. Deb, you pulled that. You have the floor.
Yes, thank you. I would like to have the council consider adjusting the liquor license renewal fees to offer a 3-month credit to the folks that have suffered greatly during this COVID-19 time. The amount of their liquor licenses are pretty considerable, and we know that a 3-month credit will not get them all the way there, but I would propose that we issue a credit to them as a good faith effort in helping them with their cash flow during this tough time.
Before we ask for a second, I'd ask you to consider modifying that to, let's do the resolution to refund or reduce, or actually reduce the fee for the period of time equal to when they're required to be closed, so that we don't have to come back and do it again, because I don't believe anybody wants to charge them fees until such time as they reopen. So if we do it that way, we don't have to keep coming back and voting on it again.
I would agree to that friendly amendment.
Okay, with that, can I ask you to make a motion to that effect, please?
I will make a motion that we reduce the fees for the liquor license renewal by the amount of time that they need to be closed due to COVID-19.
Thank you. Can I get a second on that?
I'll second the motion. Councilmember Vogt.
Discussion. Dana, you had your hand up. Discussion.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Just staff would be looking for clarification. We do differentiate between on-sale, off-sale, and
good
brewery, so staff would be looking for a clarification of where this would apply.
Go ahead.
I would say that let's apply this to both on-sale, off-sale, and brewery, all liquor establishments.
Okay, so
Is that clear?
yeah, they can still do off-sale now, right? So they're still doing off-sale. So it would be the brewery and on-sale that they're prohibited from engaging in business, right?
That is correct, Mayor. And then we do have a smaller fee. Cindy can correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's $200 or $300 for Sunday on sale.
Oh, that's right. So I think it's $3,200 for on sale, $310 for off sale, and then a $200 fee for Sunday. Is that right?
So that sounds correct.
So
Yes,
with that,
that's correct.
do you want to withdraw that motion and make another motion?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Let me take a run at this. I make a motion that we reduce the licensing fee amounts for all businesses on sale, off sale, Sunday sale, and brewery by
Okay.
the amount of time required to be closed due to COVID-19.
And my only objection is the off sale, which they can participate in today. They're not prohibited for that. So would
I
you agree
accept that
to?
a friendly amendment.
Okay.
Cindy, how you doing out there?
It's tough, but I'll get it.
So I don't think we have I think everybody understands. Deb modified her amendment. I think it's understood. Council members, do we need to go through it again, or are you okay? And if you're okay, can I get a second, please?
I will second that. This is Judy.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, roll call vote. Judy, please.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Gregory?
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Vogt?
Aye.
Thank you. Deb?
Aye.
Mayor votes aye. That passes unanimously. Cindy, do you need any clarifying comments from the council, or do you have that?
Nope, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So that finishes then the consent agenda, and thank you, right? I knew where you were going, but we wanted to be correct here. So next item is the first item on the regular agenda. This is 7.1. Consider appointment of Debbie Kraft to a 3-year term on Victoria Lakes and Water Quality Advisory Committee. Dana, is this your item?
Community and Economic Development Director Marty Dahl, who's joining us on the phone.
I'm here.
Thank you, Marty. This is yours. Rock and roll.
All right, Mayor, members of the council, as Dana just mentioned, I'm Marty Dahl, Community and Economic Development Director for the City of Victoria, joining you here live from my office. As you are aware, the Lakes and Water Quality Advisory Committee was established in June 2018 with the purpose of providing input and feedback on issues related to lakes, wetlands, shorelands, and water quality in Victoria. The committee, as it was established by the council, is made up of at-large members and representatives from 7 designated lakes with staggered 3-year terms. On March 9th of this year, the council held interviews and appointed 3 members to vacant positions on that committee. One of those vacancies was a position that had been held by Miss Debbie Kraft. In April, Miss Kraft contacted the city and indicated that she was out of the state in January and February, and that she was unaware that her term was expiring or that she needed to reapply. So Ms. Kraft is asking the council to consider her application for reappointment to the committee at this time. Just a couple of notes, and I believe Ms. Kraft is on the line with us as well if you'd like to speak to her. She did submit an application for reappointment that was provided to you prior to the meeting. The Lakes and Water Quality Committee, as it was established, does not set a limit on the number of members. After your March appointments, the committee currently includes representatives from all 7 of those identified lakes, as well as 2 at-large members. And city policy number 1.1.008 states that commission and committee members are expected to attend at least 75% of scheduled meetings and are expected not to miss 3 consecutive meetings. And as it was noted in your background, that Ms. Kraft attended one of the 4 Lakes and Water Quality Committee meetings in 2019, though it should also be noted that staff canceled several meetings that year as well. So with that, as I mentioned, Ms. Kraft is on the line if you would like to speak to her. Otherwise, I'll open it up for any questions.
Thank you, Marty. Let me begin with asking the council members on the phone. Do any of you have any questions, comments?
This is Judy. I was on the Water Quality Committee committee last year, and I can tell you that we did only have 4 meetings, and we were spending a lot of time trying to figure out what we were actually going to be doing. And I know that Debbie was also on the task force for the Rolling Acres, and she was spending a lot of time on that. My only question would be to her is, does she feel that she would be able to dedicate the time to the water quality this year, because they do have a focus now and it's going to need her presence.
Thank you, Judy. Debbie, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I think I'm back online now. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, we
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for taking the time and having me. It's been interesting to listen to the meeting here today. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I was there at more than one of the 2019 meetings, but and the question was, will I have time, is what Judy asked. And yes, I think in 2018, 2019, we were doing some remodel in our house, as well as being highly engaged in the Rolling Acres Road project, which I'm still engaged in as well. And the two definitely do dovetail and overlap when it comes to water quality. So I think participating in both is important, and this is definitely a high priority and interest to me. I think I was one of the first people to suggest that we have this committee. So yeah, I think I would dedicate the time, and it's important.
All right, thank you. Judy, any other questions, or was that it?
No, I just know that she was one of the beginning people that asked to create this committee, and I think she has a lot to offer. I just wanted to make that noted.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Gregory, questions or comments?
Well, a couple of comments. First of all, we did have an opening that went unfilled, so having someone fill it would be a good thing. And it is also my understanding that the Lakes and Water Quality Committee is, from its inception, has kind of struggled to kind of find its way, and I think they're finally on track to stay more focused and on certain areas. So I think this year is going to be a good year for the Water Quality Committee, and I'd welcome Debbie's input on that.
Thank you. Councilmember Vogt?
I'm the new liaison to the Water Quality Committee. So the only question I have is the one attending 1 out of 4, is that a bad number? Or is there confusion here? Are we talking and we don't have to be having this discussion? Or is there a misunderstanding? Was Debbie there 2 or 3 meetings instead of 1?
Should I answer that question?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Debbie.
This phone format is unusual, and I'm getting used to it. I do enjoy having you guys in person and enjoy going to the meetings, but I'm pretty confident I was at 2 of them, and maybe even 3, but I know there was some cancellations of meetings, and then, the beginning of 2020, really some confusion as to when the meetings were. But I'm pretty sure I was at 2 of them. And actually, I think possibly 3. I don't know how that would happen, that it wouldn't be recorded, because they do take attendance at each one, but I'm not quite sure what happened there.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Vogt, go ahead.
That's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Debbie, but this is Councilmember McMillan. Different Debbie. Questions or comments?
I have no comments. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. We had an open slot. She wants to come back in. I don't have an issue with that. I think we've addressed the attendance question sufficiently. So, quick note, do you need an actual vote by the council here?
Yes.
Okay. With that, can I get a motion, please, from a council member?
Judy Black, I make a motion that we add Debbie Kraft to the water quality.
Thank you. Can I get a second, please?
Councilmember Vogt, I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Roll call vote. Judy first.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Gregory.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Vogt.
Aye.
Councilmember Deb McMillan.
Aye.
No questions there. Mayor votes aye, so it's unanimous. Debbie Kraft, you're reappointed to the Lakes and Water Quality Advisory Committee. So thank you for helping and serving the city.
Mayor, member of the council, before we move on, just to clarify, that will be a 3-year term expiring March 31st, 2023.
Correct. That's, do you need, we need to modify the motion? You've got it?
Yeah,
Okay.
we've got it.
All right, perfect. Next item, 7.2, I do have public comment. Kara, do you want to give a, I assume this 7.2 is it, oh, this is Marty too?
Yep.
Marty, do you want to give your overview first and then I'll read the comments, or you want me to read the
What,
first?
Mayor, members of the council, if it works for you, I can give my presentation first. And then I know we do have representatives from the from Lennar on the line as well, Paul Tabone, as well as Charlie from engineering there, who have some information to speak to the council about as well. But if it works for you, I'll give my presentation and I can go ahead and share my screen.
All right, you give you the presentation. I'll read the one comment we have, and then we can ask Paul to speak for Lennar. So go ahead, Marty.
All right. I am going to get my screen shared here. All right. Is everybody seeing that slide that says Victoria City Council meeting on it?
Yes.
Right now? All right. So thank you, mayor, members of the council. Before you this evening, as mentioned, is a preliminary plat application by Lennar Corporation for the Laketown 16th edition. Staff has a presentation outlining this proposal, which includes information from the April 21st Planning Commission public hearing, which was just last week. And as I mentioned, we do have representatives from the applicant on the line as well. So the proposed Laketown 16th edition is located south and west of Timber Terrace and north of Marsh Lake Road, as you can see from the map on the screen here. It's the final large edition of the Laketown development, which began back in 2004. The current subject site is undeveloped. It does contain a large wetland area, as you can see here, and also a woodland stand in this area here. The property is guided low-density residential in the 2040 comprehensive plan, and the proposal is in line with that low-density zoning. The preliminary plat proposes 25 single-family lots on 11.22 buildable acres. The applicant is also requesting a rezoning from R2 to PUD. This is because the R2 district for which this area was rezoned in a previous edition was changed last year by the city council to only allow for duplex multifamily homes. So the applicant is requesting that rezoning change in order to allow single-family homes in this parcel. Also, just a quick note, please know that the rezoning is not part of any requested action for this evening, but rather it would be conditioned concurrent with any final plat approval for this site. And then, as is noted on this slide, the PUD lot sizes and standards that the applicant is proposing are consistent with what that old R2 zoning had been previously before it was changed by the council, and consistent with some of the other Laketown development areas and other developments in this area. Access to these new homes would be provided by an extension from Bridle Way, which would be extended down to the southwest here, as well as a new public street currently known as Catkin Court on the plans. The applicant has also dedicated 75 additional feet of right-of-way north of Marsh Lake Road in this area that would be to accommodate future road improvements and a possible future trail in that area. Utilities will be available via the Laketown 13th edition, and stormwater ponding will be located in the northeast side of the property here. The current grading plan, which is proposed, would eliminate the need for any developer-built retaining walls in this parcel, but there is some grading in some of the proposed lots that would potentially require future homeowners to privately install retaining walls to gain more usable yard space. The tree preservation plan that was submitted for this area was submitted and approved as part of the Laketown 13th edition. This was originally an outlot of Laketown 13th. That approved plan does include some significant clearing of an existing stand of trees in this area, kind of where Bridle Way will come through. It should be noted that many of the trees in this area are classified as insignificant in accordance with the city's current tree preservation ordinance. But per the information in your background report, staff is asking whether the council would like to direct the developer and staff to put together a plan to replant or reforest strategic areas within 2 city dedicated outlots that will be part of this development. Sorry, just turning the page on my notes here. So in the preliminary plat proposal, the applicant is requesting a waiver or reduction of section 33.6 in the zoning code. This section, as it's written, requires a 40-foot buffer area and an 8-foot average height berm along Marsh Lake Road, so along the property line here. The proposal that is submitted by the applicant does include an approximately 40-foot buffer area between the roadway and the homes, but it requests a modified quote-unquote half berm with planting, and the applicant will be discussing that request in more detail when they speak. And then in addition, the proposed berm planting is currently short on trees required. So staff has noted in the background that any final landscaping plan should meet requisite berm planting requirements. So because much of the Planning Commission discussion and the public hearing was related to the berm issue, I will move on to just a summary of the public hearing that took place on April 21st. During that meeting, the Planning Commission received 2 pieces of written testimony as well as 2 phone calls. And in summary, that testimony included a desire for adequate berming and screening, a desire to create an environment that balances rural and residential, a desire to ensure adequate dedication of right-of-way for a future roadway improvement and trail, some concerns about excess fill on the site, grading changes and tree removal on the site, as well as concerns about the applicant's ability to meet required sewer line depth. So after the public hearing and discussion, the Planning Commission did unanimously recommend approval of the Laketown 16th edition with the following conditions. Rezoning from R2 to plan unit development be approved concurrent to final plat. The applicant shall address to the city's satisfaction all items outlined in the April 13th, 2020 staff response letter prior to final plat approval. That letter is a number of engineering items that is pretty typical in a preliminary plat process. And then the third condition was that the applicant be required to follow the explicit standards required in section 33.6 buffers and screening of the City of Victoria's zoning code as it relates to the required berm and buffers. So the applicant, as I stated, is requesting a reconsideration of that berm condition. They did speak during the Planning Commission and public hearing about the engineering challenges that a full berm would present on the site as it is currently designed and pre-platted, including the additional fill being needed and resulting sewer depths that would be beyond city standards. And the applicant has expressed their intent to staff since that public hearing that they are going to be asking the council to reconsider that berming condition based on section 33.7, which gives the city council the authority to reduce the required buffer if certain conditions, as are noted on this slide and background, exist. And with that, I can take any questions and turn it back to you, Mayor.
All right, thank you, Marty. Before we get there, I'm going to read the residents' comments and then ask Paul Tabone from Lennar to speak, and then we'll move to the council discussion. So this comment came in from Josh and Jen Mulvihill, 5720 Marsh Lake Road, and they wrote, I quote, "We are writing concerning Laketown 16th edition preliminary plat that is in tonight's agenda. Lennar has twice brought plans before the Planning Commission that do not adhere to the City of Victoria's requirements for berms. At both instances, the Planning Commission has required Lennar to comply with city ordinances. We would ask that the city require that Lennar meet city ordinances for the 40-foot berm and screening requirement along Marsh Lake Road. The aesthetics of houses close to the road don't fit with the rest of the city. It sets a bad precedent for Marsh Lake Road and for Victoria. Moving the berm to the back side of houses does not fit with the intent of the ordinance, which is to break sight lines and to be a safety feature along a road. Just because this property has a steep grade and is challenging to develop doesn't mean that the ordinance does not apply. The Planning Commission unanimously did not grant Lennar's request, and we hope the council follows suit. Berms and screenings are an important element that makes Victoria the city it is. Please hold developers to the standard that has already been determined. Thank you, Josh and Jen Muldahill. And that ends their comments. With that, let's move to Paul. Paul, are you on the line?
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, and yes, we can. For the record, Paul, please state your name and your position at Lennar.
Paul Tabone, and I'm an entitlement manager.
Thank you. Go ahead, Paul. Floor is yours.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and try to share my screen here. I want to make sure that everybody can see it. So you should be looking at a section view. Can everybody see that?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, and can you see my little cursor moving around?
Yes.
Yep.
Great. Now, first of all, I want to thank you for allowing me to kind of go through this. It's been 15 years to complete this project, and we're looking forward to being able to get the last edition finished here. I'm going to try to keep this as short and simplified as possible. However, as you can see from this graphic, there is kind of a lot going on in a small area, ultimately the last area of the project. So I'm going to walk through this particular section that Sava Bergquist had put together for me. I do have them on the line if there are questions for Charlie when we're done, or when I'm done. So I'll start. And so if you will, look at your, I'll zoom out a second here. And imagine if we were to do a cut right down the middle of Lot 8 in a north to south fashion. So you can see existing Marsh Lake Road right here, the swale that would come down, or the slope that would come down onto Lot 8. And then this is Patkin Court that actually runs east to west, and Bridal Way that comes north to south. One thing that I want to bring your attention to is this swim manhole right at the intersection of Patkin and Bridal Way. This is the whole main reason of why we're having this discussion right now. So the staff had indicated, zoom back in for a second. The staff had indicated dedicate a half width of this road, or the future Marsh Lake Road right of way area.
You're muffling.
I'm sorry, what?
You're kind of muffled.
Yeah, thank you, Judy. Paul, you started to kind of fade out.
How about now? Is that any better?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So what, let's see. Okay, so as you can see, there's 150-foot right-of-way. 75 of it would be the north half. It was dedicated by Lennar in 2015. And I'll just start at Marsh Lake Road. So as of right now, Marsh Lake Road is 28 feet wide, and the center line is at elevation 1020. Now there's a couple of different lines as you kind of walk down the hill, and imagine if you were to, again, look at the whole thing in a section view. But this faint brown line in here is the existing grade. As you can see, it slopes fairly quickly and falls down to the low point of the site, which is the wetland kind of over here somewhere. I'll get to that in a second. What we're proposing to do is to grade the slope, and that's where the kind of the half berm came from, was basically this would serve as the back side of a slope. And what we have prepared is a 90-foot 3-to-1 slope, so 90 feet from the existing Marsh Lake Road. It comes down to a swale where a catch basin is in a storm drain. No.
All right, Paul, let me.
We're having difficulty.
Yeah, Paul,
We're having
I'm
trouble
sorry to
understanding.
interrupt you. Council, I got it. Paul, sorry to interrupt you. We're having a hard time hearing you. Are you turning your head away from your computer by any chance? I'm guessing here.
Yeah, I am, and my fan is kicked on my computer right now, so that doesn't help. Is this a little better?
Just
A little bit. Yeah, let's try to continue here. But just so you know, it's hard for us to hear you.
Okay. How about now?
great.
Excellent.
Great.
Yep.
Okay, I'm gonna do the best I can. So what we end up needing to do is come down the hill at about a 90-foot slope. It's 90 feet long, down to a swale. Now, if you're looking at that on the grading plan, this is where our catch basin is and our storm drain is. I'm going to go ahead and toggle over to that. It's right here. This is what I'm talking about. So as you come down Marsh Lake Road, as you come down the berm from Marsh Lake Road or down the hill from Marsh Lake Road, this is where the catch basin is. So to look at that in a section view, this is where the catch basin is right here. Now it's at an elevation of 992.7, which means you're coming down from a 1020 to a 992, roughly 18 feet in this particular location. This whole slope goes anywhere from 10 to 20 feet coming down from Marsh Lake Road. So what we demonstrate from there is that you have the rear yard. This is the drainage and utility easement. You have the rear yard here, and then we're showing 21 feet from the back of the pad, the back of the home. So you have the rear building pad labeled here, and you come out roughly 21 feet to the drainage and utility easement. But the actual easement is the last 10 feet of the lot. So what we had worked with staff was to try to get 30 feet minimum of backyard space, usable backyard space. And you can see that we're hitting a 3% minimum slope to have that 30 feet of backyard space. Then you have the house, you have the 50-foot deep, 55-foot deep building pad, the front setback, which is at 20 feet, and then Catkin Court right-of-way, which is at 50. I want to clarify, the staff report did say that we're doing a 60-foot right-of-way. In this particular area, it's 50 feet. However, the pavement of the road is still the same width. It's still 28 feet. So we're not making the road any more narrow. What we've done in this location is we've narrowed up the right-of-way a little bit to be able to pull everything slightly north and create more space back here to get further away from Marsh Lake Road and create usable backyard space back here. So that's the gist, and I'll stop there. I don't need to really explain the rest of the section, but if you focus on this black line, this is what's proposed. Now, if we were to grant the berm and try to build that, what it ends up looking like is this blue line. So you have to come up from Marsh Lake Road to the top of the berm, which is 8 feet. So you got a 1020 here. Here we're at 1028. So it's at 8 feet there, an 8-foot berm. Then you start to come back down. Now we have a 78-foot 3-to-1 slope, so you still have plenty of separation. But what ends up happening is because you have to come up to build the berm and then go back down, you are in effect, or we would have to, in effect, raise the entire site roughly 10 to 12 feet from what we're proposing right now, which means instead of the roof peak being here, now it's here. And instead of the foundation of the home being here, now it's up here. So everything gets moved up. I'm not even sure what the calculation of the volume of cubic yardage would be to fill that, but it would be pretty substantial to raise that entire site up. So what we're trying to accomplish here is we have a 30-foot buffer of coniferous trees down into a swale. And that's reflected on our landscape plan. If you come down the road, you can see we have 2 rows of coniferous trees. They're coniferous so that they're not losing leaves, and they would remain full all year round. So what we're trying to do is a 30-foot buffer, and again, coming down the back half of what I would visualize as a berm or kind of a landscape slope. One thing that we haven't shown here, and we could do it. I've already spoken with a landscaper. We could enhance this slope with shrubs that would, at full maturity, be about 10 to 15 feet in height. And then my other thought is we could plant like a no-mow prairie grass here. And the reason for that is because eventually, if and when Marsh Lake Road gets expanded, the city is going to need to put a trail on the north side and potentially, make that flat. So the idea is that we could do a thick type of prairie grass into taller shrubs, into coniferous trees that at full maturity would be, 20 feet or more in height, roughly. And so that could be pretty substantial landscape to create. What we already have is a 40-foot berm, but that would also, a 40-foot separation, but we'd also be able to create some pretty substantial landscaping in this area here. I hope this is all making sense. I am available for questions. Probably from Sater is available on the line. And I would appreciate the city's, any questions you have, but ultimately, hopefully we can get to a point where we can move this plat forward and finish out the community here.
All right, thank you, Paul. So now I want to limit comments for the council to discuss. Marty, just quick off the top of my head, this 3-to-1 slope, is that a city, is there any ability of the city or the council to change that ratio?
Mayor, members of the council, I am not exactly sure on the specifics of that slope. Kara, do you have any additional information?
Yeah, we do allow, and hopefully you can hear me. We do allow the slope to go up to a 2-to-1 slope. It just is typically not maintained at that point. So it's, not mowed when you're at a 2-to-1 slope.
All right, so that and 2-to-1, I want to make sure I'm thinking about this the right way. Is 2-to-1 a steeper slope?
Correct.
Got it. And that's basically what, for every 2-foot drop in elevation, you've got 1 foot horizontal?
Yep.
All right, thanks. With that, let me open it up first to council members on the phone. Judy, would you like to go first?
Well, I would like to, I watched the Planning Commission meeting. It was pretty extensive. I didn't see this picture on that. The question that has been burning in my mind about this whole thing is this something, are you wanting us to not do our ordinance because you can't do it or because you don't want to?
Paul, I think that's for you.
Yep. Okay. Can you still hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. Councilor Black, member of the council, I'm actually really glad you asked that question. One thing, to answer your question, we're doing it because it's physically, the way that we're trying to design the site is physically not possible. It's not because we don't want to. I forgot one of the things that I was trying to make I wanted to make sure you could hear me, but under our proposed grade, which is this black line right here, we show a sanitary sewer that's 26.7 feet deep. If we were to build the berm and raise the site, that sanitary actually goes closer to 36 feet deep, which Public Works and Engineering has made very clear they want nothing more than 30. In fact, 30 is even kind of pushing it. I'm sure that Eric can probably vet that, but the preference is to be under 30 feet. And so that's what's really the whole linchpin of this whole community, or I guess the whole thing is this manhole right here is already set at 27, 28 feet. If you bring in additional fill, it goes to well over 30 feet, which creates a future maintenance issue and something that engineering is not going to approve. They're not comfortable with it. So to answer your question, we're not doing this because we don't want to. If we had the space and if the terrain wasn't so sloped and we weren't dealing with so many other variables in this particular area, we'd be able to look at constructing the berm. The other thing that I do want to point out, I did drive out there. I can show you pictures if you want. It's probably not necessary, but as you go further east along Marsh Lake Road and further west along Marsh Lake Road, there's not as much of a severe grade coming off of Marsh Lake Road, which means that future properties would be able to have more of the berm feature that you're looking at. But in this particular location where we're at, you're basically almost falling off the road down a hill and then trying to tie into sewer that flows back north through the rest of the community. So I know that was a long answer to a short question, but I did want to try to note that.
All right, thank you, Paul. Judy, more questions, comments?
Well, I just have concern about overriding the planning commission. I think that I would feel much better if this was to go back to them with a better explanation so that they understood exactly what is going on with this. Because when he was showing the pictures, they were just a lot of lines, and it was really hard to try to understand exactly what he was trying to explain. And I know that Commissioner Gar asked about possibly in the future doing a type of 3D modeling so that we could actually visualize what is being talked about, because like you said, and like all of the commissioners said, it's really hard to try to figure that out. All they know is that we have an ordinance and you don't want to do it. And there's a lot of significant trees that are going to be cut down, and you didn't have the same amount of replacement. So I just think it needs to go back and it needs to be relooked at again and explained better so that the planning commission is okay with it. And that's all I have to say about it.
All right, thank you, Judy. I want to clarify 2 points. And I don't know if it's Marty or Dana that are best suited to answer this, or maybe Kara. The depth of the sewer line, is that, I heard you said engineering wouldn't, I heard Paul say engineering wouldn't approve it. Do we have, as the city, do we have an issue with the depth of the sewer line here? Is that Marty or Kara? Are you on the line?
I am. Mayor, members of the council, relative to the sewer depth. So our design standards call for a maximum preferred depth of 25 feet. We have made exceptions up to 30 feet. But the problem is when you're talking about a 35-foot deep sewer, if you ever have to dig down to repair it, you really need a area twice as wide in order to excavate 35 feet into the ground. You would need like a 70-foot area that's clear in order to be able to excavate down to repair the sewer. So we very rarely put sewer in that deep. The only time we do is trunk lines. So our big diameter trunk sewer lines are often deeper because they have to be in order to minimize lift stations.
All right, so, but we have made exceptions before in the past. The other thing, Kara, were you at the Planning Commission?
I was virtually there.
Was this diagram shown to the Planning Commission?
No, the diagram was just provided to the city just before 5 o'clock today. I believe Paul had it prepared in response to the questions of the Planning Commission in order to make it more clear.
Yep, got it. All right, thank you. Let me go back to the council. Judy, was that it then? Any more questions, Judy?
Right now, that's it.
All right, thank you. Council Member Gregory, questions or comments?
Thank you, Mayor. It's a little frustrating. It looks like we're considering changing the ordinance to fit this plan. It might not be the ordinance that's wrong. It might be the plan itself. It looks like to me almost this whole row of 11 homes may have to be omitted in order to fit in this area. We're trying to squeeze 2 lots in between this marsh area and the road, and there just might not be enough room to do that. My question to Paul, are the challenges going east going to be greater than on your lot? I know you mentioned toward the west, there isn't so much of a slope, but what about to the east? Do we have a bigger problem going east?
As you continue east along Marsh Lake Road, it actually does level out. I would ask Holly at Sather to see if you could provide an explanation or response to the existing topo that's out there. But even as I drove the road, I realized last week when I was driving around out there, I realized that there is not as steep of a drop off as we continue east on Marsh Lake Road down to County Road 11.
So it's both on the east and the west. That's not a problem, but the only problem we have is right on your lot.
I'm not saying it's not a problem. I'm saying it's less slope as you continue to head in both directions. I don't know what the issue may or may not be until a development application comes in. But as we're trying to get the sewer down into this area, that's the issue that we're running into.
Okay. No more questions.
All right, thank you. Council member vote?
I have 2 or 3 questions at least here. First of all, I didn't listen to the Planning Commission meeting. Did that get discussed in detail as to why the Planning Commission felt it should not vary from our ordinance? Why were they so adamant about not varying from the ordinance?
Council member vote, mayor, members of the council, this is Marty Dahl again. From my takeaway from that discussion, a lot of it was due to precedent. They didn't want to set a precedent along Marsh Lake Road was what was discussed as to why they wanted to have that full berm in place. And then again, I think just back to the intent of the berm to be able to provide that screening and buffer between the residential area, both from the road and from the home, to those land use changes. That would be my takeaway of what the Planning Commission's comments about why they wanted a full berm.
Okay, let me talk about the berm with Paul. Looking at your close to Marsh Lake Road there, where you say the top of the berm, if you had followed the ordinance, you would have gone up and made a berm there. Is it possible that you could get to that height and then have a steeper slope on the house side of the berm down to close to the normal ground level where you have a swale? So there would be a steeper hill there instead of a gentle 3-to-1 slope.
Sure, I understand your question. The issue with having a steeper berm comes in for future maintenance. So if you have can you all still see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
So if you have a steeper berm that comes down more kind of that nature there, it becomes a maintenance issue to mow or to maintain when you get steeper than a 3-to-1. The other thing that I did want to point out is at one point we did have a slope. I would have to go back, and we've been through several iterations of this plan. And if we did try to build this, what we ended up having in the backyard was a retaining wall. And we had a minor one to start with because we weren't showing a full 8-foot berm to start just because of the slope that we're dealing with. If we were to try to go up and then back like that, we're basically forcing a retaining wall to be built right in this area here. And the feedback from staff at that time, originally we had like a 4-foot wall, kind of small down here. But if we were to do something like this, we would have to build probably looking at about a 15-foot tall retaining wall. And the feedback from staff was that they didn't want that there and it wasn't a good idea to put it there. So we ended up taking it out and trying to find a solution that utilized only grading and eliminated retaining walls from the original plan.
Yes, Paul, but the reason you need a retaining wall is you want to maintain a certain sized backyard. You're just trying to extend the backyard. If you went further, you would have a smaller yard. which would probably eliminate most of the retaining wall.
So that was actually another concern of staff is that it was brought to our attention that our backyards were not large enough for usable space. We were trying to eliminate retaining walls and provide more usable space in the backyard. And that's why we ended up going this route with the planning. We also, for purposes of the sewer, we also eliminated a connection down to March Lake Road. So it's been through a few different iterations of
Paul, Councilmember Vogt, if you don't mind, you kind of broke up. I heard a 4-foot retaining wall, and I think I heard a 16-foot retaining wall. Was that correct? Did I hear that right?
In the original submittal for this plan, we showed a retaining wall right here, like about 4 feet. About 4 feet tall. If we were to do a slope or try to build the berm as it's coming down, what we would end up doing is having to construct roughly a 15-foot retaining wall to hold back that dirt. It would be required to build that slope.
And
okay, so that. Go ahead.
This is Judy. So you're telling me that staff told you that they didn't want that?
We were told to minimize and/or eliminate retaining walls to the fullest extent feasible.
Councilmember Black, Mayor, members of the council, if I may, Marty Dahl, Community and Economic Development Director. Yes, as we were reviewing the plans for this proposal, the original proposal did not include a full berm. So when Mr. Tabone is talking about that 4-foot retaining wall, that was a 4-foot retaining wall based on a very similar 3-to-1 or whatever the degree of the slope was down from Marsh Lake Road. So that did not include a berm. There was no berm that was asked to be removed from staff. What staff's recommendation was to the applicant, which the applicant was able to provide, was a regrading of some of this area to eliminate those what would end up being privately maintained large retaining walls. So I think to Mr. Tabone's point is that in the initial proposal, it had that 4-foot retaining wall. If they were to try to put in this full berm as their proposal currently sits, that would need to be a 15-foot retaining wall. But that is correct. Staff did ask the applicant to try to grade this site to eliminate having privately owned and maintained large retaining walls throughout the development.
So this is Councilor Vogt again. What's the precedent on maintaining these berms? It's not necessary that the homeowners or the association maintains the berms. They can let the berms run wild and ensure that there's plenty of trees. They don't have to be mowed, do they?
Marty, do you want me to jump in?
Please.
On that one?
Please.
This is Kara again, city engineer. So typically most of our berms that you typically see along our major corridors are actually located in outlots that are deeded to the city. And then the city is responsible for the maintenance of those berms. And you are correct, Councilmember Vogt, that we typically don't perform regular mowing or maintenance to the berms. The ones in the rest of Laketown, kind of by where you turn into the neighborhood off of Red Fox, a lot of those berms have a 2-to-1 slope and are left to run wild. I do want to point out, while this drawing is up right now, though, Paul, if you could move your cursor over to the berm. And I'll note that I haven't seen this drawing until the meeting tonight, but as drawn, that berm is located within the future Marsh Lake Road right-of-way, which is where the road and trail needs to be located. The trail actually needs to be located near the right-of-way line. So I'm not quite sure how the berm as drawn fits with what the proposed needs of the roadway corridor are long-term. So just wanted to.
So Carol, where does the berm, where should the trail be?
So typically, Paul, the trail would be just inside your green 150-foot right-of-way line.
Right in here?
Yep, 2 feet off the end of that. And typically the berm is located on the private side of that right-of-way line. So within, outside the road right-of-way.
Yeah, so Kara, essentially what you're saying is that the berm would have to be inside of here.
Yes.
So it sounds, Kara, are you saying that there's going to be a problem putting in a trail here?
Well, the trail is a separate question.
Well, in my mind, it's not, because we shouldn't have to wait 40 years to get a trail. So
part of what's happening in this particular location is this is the high point of Marsh Lake Road. So that's why Paul was describing the slopes being a little bit less challenging as you go to the east and west. Part of the reason why staff is not requiring them to construct a trail today is because we don't know where to tell them horizontally or vertically where to locate the trail, because we don't have a finalized horizontal or vertical alignment for future Marsh Lake Road. So if they were to put the trail in today, wherever they put it, it would likely most certainly need to be ripped out and rebuilt at the time the road gets reconstructed and the rest of the trail gets connected. So we don't have enough information to tell them, specifically where to build the trail.
So hypothetically, let's just say that the county, instead of coming in 40 or 50 years, the county comes in 20 years. So in 20 years, anything that's built here would be ripped out, and the roadway and the trail would be very close to these houses, and their privacy would disappear. Does that sound like a plausible scenario?
So in Paul's proposed plan, where he shows the landscaping buffer with coniferous trees, that sort of green area there that he's highlighting,
Sure.
It's likely that would remain intact. The regrading and modifications to the roadway would occur on the left side of your screen to that landscaping buffer.
And so, hey, Kara, can I just ask, so when it was regraded in Marsh Lake Road was constructed, would there be potential for additional landscaping to continue to thicken this up here? Or would the road come all the way over?
So though the road alignment wasn't officially finalized, the county had agreed to take that 150 foot of right-of-way need down to 120. So of what you're seeing there, we would need up to your green landscaping buffer for road and trail improvements. So all the way up to that point would be road under the county's plan that we never agreed to, but that was the last version of a plan we saw for a 2-lane divided road.
Right, but Kara, if I'm not mistaken, when the council approved Marsh Lake Road, one of the directions we gave staff was to make sure you included on any development coming up to Marsh Lake Road to include the right-of-way access we needed for future development of Marsh Lake Road, and I believe that also included the trail. And what I'm hearing, if I'm understanding this correctly, is that this drawing doesn't reflect that.
The drawing does, in fact, reflect it, because Lennar had previously already dedicated 75 feet of additional right-of-way for the city. So they had given more than they technically would need to now under the current version.
What's the probability the county will put most of the construction on the south side of the road to minimize the right-of-way usage on the north side?
That'll depend on where there's right-of-way and what the county engineer is looking for out of a design at that time.
Right, but I'm sorry, but to that point, my understanding is the county did look at this and that the city and county came to agreement that right-of-way, the 75 foot of right-of-way, would be sufficient for the county's future road needs. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so we weren't, at this point, the county wasn't looking for us to ask for any more from them.
Right, and as part of that, so the question I want to make sure is clear, as part of that 75 feet, did that also include the trail on the north side the city council talked about, or is that 75 feet only include the future county road?
No, it includes the trail.
Okay, so where is that 75-foot right-of-way in this diagram? How far over does it go?
That's that green, there you go, Paul, that green vertical line is the current 75-foot platted right away.
All right, so if we fast forward 20, 30, 40 years, right, and the county comes in, this berm would be taken away anyways, and the trail would go over to the right, you said 2 feet in from that green vertical line that the cursor's on now?
Generally, yes, yep.
Okay, and so as we're looking at this development, we need to account for that. And even if the berm gets moved or shifted, if they take all of that right away, the road's right there, and then there's basically no berm for the houses beyond that.
Right.
Yeah, typically, we would require the berm to be on the other side of that right-of-way line.
Right, if it's not on the right side of that green line, the berm basically goes away when the county develops the road.
Right. So then they won't have a berm.
Then there'll be no berm at all, exactly, that's the problem.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, as I noted, staff hadn't seen this drawing, but we wouldn't allow the berm to be located in the future Marsh Lake Road right away.
Okay.
For the reasons you just noted and the cost associated with having to haul all that dirt out.
Plus, it's impossible to build a berm closer to where the houses are planned. You'd come up with some monstrosity that wouldn't work. It seems to me this plan might be unusable in its present form, and maybe we should send it back.
I agree.
I don't think any of us in council step in here if I misspeak, but I don't think any of the council members want to see go through all this work, build the berm, only to have it taken out when the county builds their road. It defeats the entire purpose of approving this with the berm. So, Paul, Kara, given that discussion, if the berm were to be on the right side of the green line, assuming that could be worked out, if we scroll over to the right in the diagram, are there other things that we could do to allow the developer to develop these homes by looking at some of the setbacks or slopes or retaining walls, any combination thereof, where we would get the berm where it needs to be, still be able to retain it when the county builds their road, and still allow the developer to build the homes they want to build? Or is it we simply are running out of real estate and there's not enough room to combine and do all of that? Kara, Marty, either one of you comment on that, please?
Mayor, members of the council, it would be hard for us to speculate on behalf of the developer about what a revised plan with a berm on the right side of that right of way would look like. I can say, and as was noted in our background packet, we do agree, and engineering agrees, that there are challenges if a berm were to be placed in the current plat and the current configuration, but without seeing a plan that is in a different configuration that puts a focus on the berm, I don't know that we could say that for certain. Does that sound accurate, Kara?
That's fair. I don't want to have you speculate here on a moment's notice without some time to think through it. Let me finish up with Councilmember Vogt. Councilmember Vogt, do you have any other additional comments or questions?
I do. Did I hear at the beginning of the presentation that the original development here was for twin homes and it was changed to single family? Is that true?
Council member Vogt, mayor, members of the council, no. This area was zoned R2 back when the R2 standard, it was a single family residential district. The council has since changed that.
So the question I have to the developer, it appears you're being squeezed for land here and you're trying to make the best of it. Have you looked at putting twin homes in this area? Because you would get twice as many homes in a much smaller footprint. And is that something you looked at that might work?
We did look at doing a different product along Marsh Lake Road. Actually, twin homes are even deeper than single family homes. You can see the building pads are 55 feet for the single family homes. For a twin home, it would need to be closer to 80, but that presents another issue. I just want to kind of point out as we're having these discussions, and I had talked about this with staff as well, that there is a section of the code that I'm sure everyone's aware of, section 33.7, a reduction in required buffer, that stipulates that council may grant a waiver of the buffer requirements and permit a fence of not less than 6 feet in height. Provisions for landscaping to soften the visual appearance of the fence and provide additional buffering may be required and will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. So I was kind of, what I was prepared to do, or kind of was hoping we could have the conversation about maybe enhancing some of the landscaping and putting up a fence, because the ordinance does allow the provision to do that. And now having had all these discussions about future berms and Marsh Lake Road expansion and everything else, my thought was that we could still provide a pretty good amount of screening and buffering with the coniferous trees, maybe with some 10 to 15 foot shrubs, the prairie grass, like I said, and maybe a 6-foot fence as well. And maybe work with staff to put that in a location where they might be comfortable with it.
All right, let me, Paul, thank you for that. Let me hold that thought for a moment. Councilmember Vogt, do you have any other further comments or questions?
Nothing further.
All right, Councilmember McMillan?
Yeah, a question. I think Paul and I are kind of going the same direction here. The idea behind this 8-foot buffer is to provide the screening and the land, some kind of a screen and a buffer to the other neighborhood. And I'm wondering if there's another way to do that side of the berm that would be acceptable, that would get us what we need. And then my other question is around this sewer. I'm concerned about the fact that this seems to be a pretty significant problem that we haven't addressed either. So in order to get this house here and this sewer depth at the right place, one of the things that struck me, if Marty, on your presentation, you had a question about sewer. Can you go back to those questions again?
Sure, yes, and Councilmember McMillan, Mayor, members of the council, as the preliminary plat is currently in the application, the sewer depths do all meet engineering standards. They are under that 30-foot depth. So as the application as it stands, we do not, at least internally, see any issues with the sewer depth. It would be if those grades needed to be changed with a berm that it could potentially create an engineering issue. But I am pulling my presentation back up here. One second, sorry. So I believe, Councilmember McMillan, the area you are referring to was in the public hearing testimony. Is that correct?
No, go one more slide, maybe.
Because we did have a note about public hearing testimony having concerns about meeting requirements for sewer line depth, but from a staff, go ahead.
No, this was more towards the end where you said we had to.
Oh, sure. Is this the slide you're referring to?
No.
At a full berm would be.
Yeah. Including large amounts of fill being needed and concerns about resulting sewer depths.
Yeah. I think we need to, I'm wondering if there are other options for screening besides a berm. That doesn't change the grading so the sewer becomes a problem.
You know, I'm not suggesting this because I don't think it's appropriate for Victoria, but conceptually, like on 35W, where you see the big walls that block 35W from the neighborhoods on each side, in essence, that separates 35 from those neighborhoods. The same concept although I don't want a big monstrosity wall in Victoria, but maybe there's a way that we can.
I would suggest landscaping or,
Well, is there a decorative way that fits with the community that we can come up with that achieves the same thing, right? And maybe, I really think, let me throw this out here for the council to consider. There's clearly issues with the site. We're looking and we're trying to see if there's ways that we can tinker with either the slope, the type of berm. We all want to, I believe, get to the same conclusion where we separate Marsh Lake Road from the homes. We have the road, the room for the county and for their road at some point in the future along with the trail. I'm almost wondering at this point, instead of trying to solve for this now, we direct this to go back with staff to work with developer and bring us options that for us and the planning commission to consider, because I won't approve this to put the berm in only to remove it. It doesn't get us to where we need to go. And I don't think we should be, as council members, trying to solve this problem. I think the staff is hearing and Paul is hearing what we're talking about. I think we send it back to them to see if they can't come up with something different, either a different product, different slopes, combination of a berm and maybe a smaller retaining wall, maybe a smaller berm with a fence on top to get us to the height and the blocking. And maybe, quite frankly, Lennar may just have to bring in fill for this row of houses and step down for the row of houses across the street. Maybe have a tiered effect. I don't know. I don't want to solve the problem. I'm just saying there's a lot of different options. So I think I'd like the council to comment on whether we send this back and ask staff to work with Paul and then have it go back to the planning commission once more too.
Mayor, members of the council, Marty, Community and Economic Development Director, and I may have to ask Bob Vos to weigh on this as well. The one issue that we would run into with tabling this item tonight is that the 60, 120-day rule was extended by applicant's proposal. It was extended to today. So I don't know, Bob, if you can speak to whether or not the applicant would be able to verbally provide an exception or an extension during this meeting, or how that would work procedurally with the 60 and 120-day rule.
Good call, Marty. Bob, are you on?
Here I am. This is Bob Vos, city attorney.
Hey.
Would you comment on the timeline that Marty mentioned?
Sure, Mayor and Council, Marty's exactly right. When we take actions on zoning matters, we have to comply with what we all call the 60-day rule. This is a subdivision application, a plat application, and so it's actually a different rule. But as it happens, we have just 120 days by that rule. We have 120 days to act. I understand from what Marty's saying that period runs now. And so, yes, we would need developers' consent to, and by the way, I'll editorialize, I think going back to the Planning Commission in light of the amount of new information here, that in the normal course would make all the sense in the world. Your Planning Commission didn't have the benefit of everything that we've heard here tonight. So that makes perfect sense. But yes, developer would have to consent to that. I'm not so terribly concerned, Marty, about getting that consent in writing here tonight. If Paul is authorized to agree to it and inclined to agree to it, we could confirm that tonight with an email, and that would be fine. But yes, the bottom line is yes, developer's representative, I think, would have to agree to a further extension of time. We can't unilaterally give ourselves more time. And so absent that consent, absent that agreement, I think council would have to take action on the preliminary plat application tonight.
All right, thank you, Bob. Paul, to that point, would the council has to make a decision tonight or get your approval to extend this based on what I said before? Before I ask the council to weigh in, would you be willing to voluntarily extend it based on what I proposed to the council? Or do you want a decision tonight?
Before I extend it, would the council be willing to entertain a condition of approval that we would have to be we would have to work with staff at final plat to be in conformance with section 33.7. I think, and the reason I ask is because I think we all have, I think we're all on the same page in that we can all kind of agree that we can work towards a combination of enhanced landscaping, maybe some earthwork tweaking, and a or you know, maybe some modification and a fence. You know, something that's country that kind of reflects the theme that the city wants to see, and is in conformance with 33.7. And you know, the council is going to get one more pass at this, and maybe it would be something that we could work so that we don't have to wait another month for a commission approval. We could address it prior to final plat and at final plat, work with staff to come up with something in the meantime, and then when we come back for final plat, we'd be able to address those concerns. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Paul, let me ask you to hang on a second. Before I ask, do you have the authority to make that verbal commitment for Lennar tonight?
I mean, no disrespect when I ask this, but do I have a choice between that and or getting the plat approved or not?
No. I'm just simply asking, do you have the authority to commit Lennar if we agree to something? That's your role and your responsibilities? We don't need somebody else, Lennar, to be able to agree to this. That's really what I'm trying to confirm.
Yeah, if need be, I could do that to keep the project moving.
Okay, Bob, are you okay with that? There's no legal issue here.
Am I here? This is Bob again. Sorry, Mayor. I was trying to unmute myself. Yes, to your procedural question, am I okay with Paul representing that he has the authority? Yes, I am okay with that. I think I know Paul and his scope of authority from prior projects, and I that is sufficient from my perspective.
All right, thank you, Bob. So Marty, what Paul is asking us to do is to streamline the process. I want to make sure the council understands specifically what's being asked. So I'm going to tell you what I heard, and please feel free to correct me. Instead of having to go back to the Planning Commission again, I think what Paul is asking is, given the discussion tonight by the council members, you meet with Paul and his representatives, you try to come up with a solution that meets what we're talking about here, and that would then come back to the city council for final approval, and it would not go back through the Planning Commission. Did I accurately describe what Paul is asking us to do?
Mayor, members of the council, Marty Dahl again. There are a few pieces to that. So because this is a PUD application, final plat does go back to the Planning Commission for PUD. So if this were to get approved with conditions, it would go back to PUD for final plat. Secondly, I think we just want to clarify what is being asked for that condition if the council chooses to consider that. The Planning Commission had asked as a condition that 33-6, which is the zoning code that requires those very specific berm heights and buffer areas, would be a condition that those be met explicitly. What I am hearing that Mr. Tabone is proposing is that council consider 33-7, which is what I have up on the screen currently, which includes some of those reduction in buffer items. So I'll let Paul, Mr. Tabone, speak to if that's what he's asking for, but that was my interpretation. So I just want to make sure we are clear on what that condition would be if the council chooses to go that route.
Paul, is that what you're asking for? Not the requirements under 33-6, but in fact, the council consider requirements under 33-7 here?
Mayor, staff, and council, that is what I'm requesting. Particularly 33-7B.
D as in David?
That's correct.
Okay. One last question. Thank you, Paul. One last question. If the council approves this without seeing what the PUD is going to come back, are we forced then to approve it at PUD, or we still have the ability to say, no, this isn't what our intent is?
Mayor, members of the council, I will confirm this with Bob, but I believe that just like preliminary plat, that the Planning Commission would have an opportunity to recommend approval and denial, as well as the council would have the ability to approve or deny a final plat. Is that correct, Bob?
Mayor, Council Bob Vos, yeah, I think that question turns, Mayor, it's a good one. It turns on how you would craft the condition, the added condition that we're sitting here talking about. If the added condition were applicant will revise plans to create a separation under 33-7D that is acceptable to the Planning Commission and the council, then of course you're giving yourself the future discretion to find what they propose not to be acceptable and to reject or deny their final plat and PUD for that reason. So if you grant yourself in the condition we're talking about, future discretion, that's enforceable.
Okay.
All right. So Bob, have you heard enough of the discussion where you feel you can craft something with Paul that, if you will, protects the process to make sure that the council gets to see what the final will be before we give final approval? What the final design will be, I should say.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, I'm confident that we can craft both an agreement to extend if we had to, or not going that route, we could craft a condition, language for a condition that would allow you to approve this now with that condition and would grant to you and the Planning Commission discretion in the future to test what's been proposed, what change is being proposed, and reject or accept that final solution at the next bite. So I'm not clear whether you want to ask Paul to extend now and go back to Planning Commission, or you want to grant approval now, propose approval now with a new condition. But either way, I think that could be accomplished.
Mayor,
Okay, thank you, Bob. And with that, let me go back to the council to see what the council wants to do. Judy, you go ahead.
Yes, Mayor. The thing is we don't have to wait an entire month for Planning Commission. They meet twice a month now. So they would be meeting in another week. So I think that it should go back to, they should work with staff, figure out what needs to be done, and then go back to the Planning Commission, and then it would be back with us. I don't think 2 weeks is going to make that much difference. And I have concern with the fact that it's, you know, you're talking about fences and stuff, because you're talking about sound barriers as well because of the equipment that's going up and down that road with the farmers. And I think a little more thought needs to be put in this instead of trying to rush through it.
Right, and I think that's what the time that we're asking the staff to do. With that, Councilmember Gregory, additional comments?
I would agree with Councilmember Black. We're being shown information here for the very first time. We're seeing it for the first time. Staff is seeing it for the first time. The Planning Commission never saw that particular drawing. And so we're being asked to make some pretty significant changes here. I think I've put a lot of faith in our Planning Commission, and I would like them to have another shot at this.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Vogt?
Mayor and Council, having spent 7 or 8 years on the Planning Commission, I would never leave the Planning Commission out of the loop in a situation like that, like this. And so I am sure glad everyone is coming up with the fact that we don't approve anything tonight and we get this worked out quickly and it goes to the Planning Commission again. And then the Planning Commission gets it back to us again quickly. So I take it the reason was being suggested that the Planning Commission be kept out of the loop was to save time. I think we can do this quickly. And people have talked about the purposes of berms for separating neighborhoods. To me, the purpose of berms, having been on the planning commission for a long time, was to protect the homeowners from the road in sounds and sights, and also to protect the road from the homeowners. So there was a sense of privacy and there was a sense of where the road was. So to me, that's the most important thing. And an exception to the berm, if it's done correctly, to where it's effective, in other words, it's protecting the homeowners from the road, including sounds, and it looks nice, it looks good. So fences have to be built properly, and they have to be built to last, because who knows when the county is coming in here. I think there's a solution. And I regret the fact that this detailed drawing, which is very informative, wasn't available to the Planning Commission. So I agree that we should send this back to have staff work with Paul, come up with some alternative plans that will work for him, go back to the Planning Commission, and I think the Planning Commission might be more receptive if they had more information.
All right, thank you. Councilmember McMillan?
I think everybody summarized that nicely. I have no further comments.
And neither do I. So,
Mayor,
go ahead.
Sorry, this is Marty again. Could I just jump in on the timeline question? It would be extremely difficult to have this brought back to the Planning Commission with any sort of changes outside of maybe this new exhibit for next week's meeting, as that packet will go out this Thursday, which gives us two days to get any additional information, have time to review. So if the council does choose to go that way, I believe we'd probably be looking at the May 19th Planning Commission meeting at the earliest.
I think that's fine. That's not a long time, and as long as Paul doesn't object, we can get it quickly there, and then we could have this potentially back in front of the council at the next council meeting. Is that accurate, Dana?
That would be accurate.
Okay, Paul, does that timeline, any objections to that? Paul, you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, now we can.
Yeah, okay, great. Sorry about that, Mayor.
That's all right. Is that timeline, Planning Commission, Marty, you said what, the 19th, I think you said?
Yes, the 19th, I would say, would be the earliest. We'd be able to get that back to Planning Commission. The following council meeting then after that would take place on Tuesday, the 26th, because Monday is Memorial Day.
Oh, that's right. All right, Paul, is that timeline, would you agree to that?
I can understand the, I suppose the only issue that I have is I know I have another meeting that evening. The reason I had suggested the final plat route is because I knew that the PUD had to go back to the commission and back to the council anyway. So that's why I had suggested that. Just wanted to clarify. I'm not sure if that's,
you can't be here on the night of the 26th. Do you have somebody that can stand in for you?
I'm not sure if that's a possibility. I tried to do 2 meetings back to back a week ago, and it didn't go as well as I'd hoped. So I will even without the drive, I thought maybe I could do it because I didn't have to drive anywhere, but it didn't really work. I would like the opportunity to see if I can come up with a landscape graphic prior to Thursday. It may not be possible. That being said, I kind of have an idea of what I would like to have our landscape architect do. And I think they could turn it around relatively quickly. If that's not possible, then we'll have to work at the end of May. Marty, if that's not something
I don't think the appetite is there for the council based on what Marty said, and because the packet to comply with the law has got to be out by Thursday, there's not enough time. And I'd rather make sure that you guys sit down and have enough time to look at all of the options and to bring something back. So we'll just have to find a way to make the 26th work. And we can kind of take that offline and work with Dana, see if we can find something out. I don't know what other options we have. Worst case is the next meeting after that's only 2 weeks after. So since the council meets twice a month. So with that, Dana did draft a motion that she believes, and I think from reading it, I think it captures the desire and the intent of the council. So at this point, I'd like to ask Councilmember McMillan to make a motion, please.
McMillan makes a motion to approve with a new condition that the applicant work with the city staff to revise plans to create separation under 33-7D that is acceptable to the Planning Commission and the council.
Thank you. Can I get a second on that, council?
Councilmember Vogt seconds that motion.
Yeah,
all right. Councilmember Vogt second that motion. Council members, any further discussion? Hearing none. I'm sorry. Was there any further discussion?
Yep. Is this motion takes it out of the hands of the Planning Commission? Is that what we're doing?
No.
But we're telling them that they have to work within 33.7?
Right, 33-7D, which
We're
is
telling them
acceptance
that
to
they have to?
I'm actually, this is Cindy. I'm actually confused too. Is it the approval to go with the preliminary plat with the added condition? That's what it sounds like you're doing.
No.
No.
Why can't we, why do we have to include any language? Just say, sending it back to the Planning Commission.
We can just send it back. All right.
And if they want to approve it with 33.7, let them approve it with 33.7.
I mean, so, all right, so you don't want to go with this motion, you want to just move that we send it back to the Planning Commission to re-examine it based on the council's discussion tonight? Is that correct, Councilmember Gregory?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay,
Councilmember
Black?
Mayor, members of the council, just a reminder, we would need to get the approval of the applicant to set a new extended deadline of May 26th for the council to hear this. So we would need to get that approval.
All right, I think we already have that, but hang on, we'll take care of that, Marty. Judy, would you agree with what Councilmember Gregory said in sending it back to the Planning Commission? Okay,
yes.
Councilmember Vogt, would you agree?
I agree.
Okay, Councilmember McMillan, would you withdraw your motion?
I withdraw my motion.
All right, council members then, first off, before we ask for a motion, Paul, let's just confirm per Marty's comment, you'll agree to an extension to 26 May?
I'll agree to an extension to May 26th.
All right, thank you, Paul. With that, council members, can I get a motion, please, to refer this item back to the Planning Commission?
This is Councilmember Gregory. I make a motion that we refer this agenda item back to the Planning Commission for reconsideration.
Thank you. Can I get a second, please?
Councilor Vogt seconds the motion
you.
to send it back to the Planning Commission.
Thank you. Council members, any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote. Councilmember Black?
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Gregory?
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Vogt?
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember McMillan?
Aye.
Mayor votes aye. It is sent back to the Planning Commission unanimously. Everyone, thank you. That was I think a good discussion. We got down to what we needed to do, and I think we've got a good way to move this thing forward. So, Paul, thank you for your time. With that, that completes item 7.2. Let's move on to 7.3. Adopt a resolution receiving and accepting the feasibility report and calling for public hearing on Marsh Lake Road improvements. Kara, this is yours. Kara, if you want to give your report, then I do have a comment from the public that I'll read after that. Kara, the floor is yours.
Great. I'm just going to hopefully share my correct screen. All right. That is not what I want. Marty, you've got the sharing your PowerPoint down correctly. Hold on, I got to switch to a different document.
You're doing that. Bob, real quick, since we have a moment, you have no issues. You don't need anything else as far as completing that item 7.2 that we just finished. Is there anything that's left out or anything that we need to address real quick before we let Kara go on 7.3?
Yes, Mayor, thank you very much. That's a great segue to a conversation I was going to try to have with Marty offline, but I'll do it here in front of all of you. Marty, if you could send a draft email to me, email from you to Paul, I will look at that as we sit here during the meeting and get it back to you, and then you can get it off to Paul again tonight.
Sure.
Beyond that, Mayor, nothing. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Bob. Kara, the floor is back to you.
And I think I'm set now. All right, are you seeing Victoria City Council meeting?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, and the purpose of tonight's agenda item, you're seeing that?
Yes.
Okay, so Mayor and members of the City Council, the purpose of tonight's agenda item is very specific relative to the next step in the process should the City Council decide to potentially move forward with levying assessments for the Marsh Lake Road project. If the council wishes to move forward, the council would need to adopt the resolution accepting the feasibility report and call for a public improvement hearing. But the second item that I want to highlight is that the feasibility report does include a modification from the city's adopted assessment policy for computing the assessment. So that'll be the other topic I'll touch on. Probably not necessary, but the scope of the improvements remain unchanged from what the City Council had previously approved when you authorized final design. I will note that the plans are nearly complete and the project is being advertised for bids and the consultant team is working on the permitting process. So we are in the home stretch to moving towards construction. The estimated costs still remain in that $2.1 million amount. So the city's adopted assessment policy was first adopted in 2003 to partially fund street improvements. So at the time, the city was faced with having to reconstruct a large portion of streets throughout the city. And so after a lot of analysis, the council at the time decided that street improvements would be partially funded using special assessments. Since 2003, we've reconstructed nearly all of the city's older streets in accordance with this policy. So existing neighbors and residents throughout the city have paid a share of costs to improve the street next to their house. Most of the projects, the assessments were calculated based off 50% of the street and storm sewer costs being assessed to the adjacent property owners. There has been some exceptions to that. On municipal state aid projects, we have used some of the state aid funds to reduce the amount of assessments to the adjacent property owners. And then in the downtown area, the assessments in the core of downtown were actually higher. They were 75% of the costs were assessed. So when I applied the policy using the 50% basis, so taking the $2.1 million, dividing it by 50%, and then divvying out those costs to the assessable properties, the end result was assessments ranging from just under 30,000 up to 177,000. A very important element of the assessment policy and of state statute is that assessments must not exceed the special benefit resulting from the improvements. So we revised the assessment calculation using a previous project. So the 78th and Cochia Lane project was completed back in 2016. And so if we took the unit assessment that was used for that project and adjusted slightly for inflation, the end result were assessments that range from 11,800 to 70,800. So much more in line with what we typically have seen for assessments in the city in areas where we have larger lots. These next two maps I just put in here. They're in the feasibility study, but they show which parcels are being included in the assessment calculation. Under the city's assessment policy, roads that are properties that have direct access to the road. So as an example, these single family homes that have direct access to the road are assessed, where these residential developed lots would be assessed for an improvement on Woods Drive, not for an improvement on Marsh Lake Road. This second graphic just shows the assessable parcels on the east end of the project. So we'll have this available for reference if need be. Next is the preliminary assessment roll, which is also contained in the feasibility report. So this is a preliminary calculation of what the assessments could look like should the council move forward. The assessment amounts aren't actually finalized until the time of final assessment, which we are proposing would not occur until after the project is complete. We would expect, though, at that time, the assessments would either be consistent with these amounts or reduced. If let's say we get bids where the project costs come even lower, or some other opportunity presents itself to reduce the cost, that could occur. The study recommends that the assessments be levied over a 15-year period. That's consistent with how we've assessed all other improvements. Assessments do accrue interest. The interest rate would be the coupon rate at which bonds are issued for the project, plus 2%. The policy does provide for the potential of deferment of special assessments under some specific conditions. Specifically, retired persons and disabled persons who meet certain low-income criteria are able to defer the assessments. The policy does allow the city council to consider deferring the assessment on undeveloped parcels. In the case of those types of deferments, though, I should note that interest is continued to be accrued, and the max deferment period is equal to the assessment payment period. So if you had an undeveloped parcel that the assessment was deferred, the maximum amount of deferral time would be that 15 years. Now, the other thing that's interesting on this project is the south side of Marsh Lake Road. The lots located on the south side of the road are located in Laketown Township. So those are located outside the city limits. Attorney Vos noted Minnesota State Statute 429.052 would apply relative for street and road improvements outside of municipal boundaries. That statute provides that a municipality may construct street or road improvements with the consent of the township, but when the property we don't need the township consent because these improvements are within the city right-of-way. But when the property is brought into the city limits, the municipality may subsequently reimburse itself for all or any portion of the cost of the improvement for which we've spent money by levying an assessment upon any property abutting on but not previously assessed for the improvement. What I take that to understand to mean is that let's say the meat cutter's property comes in for annexation. Once that property is annexed, at that point, we would have the ability to levy the assessment for this project onto that property. Certainly, if there's questions on that, the city attorney can weigh in.
And I assume that applies to every property in Laketown Township that abuts Marsh Lake Road?
Correct. Yes.
All right, thank you.
So then my last slide here is the project schedule. So we are here today on April 27th, where we're presenting the feasibility report. All that's being asked of the council would be to accept the report and call for an improvement hearing. Between now and the improvement hearing, I will note that the project bid date is currently May 21st. So we are anticipating receiving contractor bids that day. That is being scheduled as an electronic bid opening, given the current COVID situation. But if the council does adopt the resolution, we have it set up for the public improvement hearing to be held on May 26th. Now, the night of that, the city council would need to, if the council is going to move forward with assessing the project, the council would need to officially order the improvement. That motion requires a 4/5 vote. So 4 out of the 5 of you would have to vote in favor of that motion. And then another item for consideration by the city council that night would be awarding a contract to a contractor. And that's just a regular majority vote. I will note that prior to the May 26th public improvement hearing, we will be holding I'm assuming it'll still need to be virtual neighborhood meetings so we can inform the property owners about the details of how this assessment process all works, so that when they are in a position to provide feedback on May 26th, they have all the information they need in order to provide that feedback to the city council. From that date, we'd be moving into construction. We're anticipating construction being completed by the end of October. Then moving back to the assessment element, on September 14th, so prior to final completion of construction, the city council would declare the cost to be assessed and called for a hearing on the assessment. And we would anticipate holding the final assessment hearing on October of 2020, where the council would then adopt the final assessment roll. The assessments would become then first due in 2021. So with that, what we'd be looking for tonight is the council has 2 options. You could adopt a resolution receiving and accepting the report and calling for the public hearing. If the council does not intend to further consider assessing for the improvements, no action is needed. So the feasibility report is only required relative to the special assessment process. So if you aren't going to consider assessments any further, you wouldn't need to adopt that report. And with that, I would take any questions.
All right, before we get to questions, we do have a comment from the Schmig Farm, and this was sent in, so let me read this in and then I'll go back to the council for comment. So this was received from Julie Schmig on Monday, April 27th, and quote, testimony for public record to the Victoria City Council from the Schmig Hilltop Farm, 5475 Marsh Lake Road, agenda item 7.3 to adopt resolution receiving and accepting the feasibility report and calling for public hearing on Marsh Lake Road improvements, date April 27th, 2020. In advance of tonight's agenda item to adopt resolution receiving and accepting the feasibility report and calling for public hearing on Marsh Lake Road improvements, the Schmig Hilltop Farm, in consultation with our attorney, offer these comments for the council's consideration as this topic continues to evolve over the coming months. Number 1, while we understand the need for this road improvement given current development along the corridor, the improvement in and of itself is not something that is needed for farming and therefore does not offer a benefit for farming, as gravel has been the suitable roadbed for our farming for generations. Number 2, it is important for the council to know, given we are currently farming and intend to continue farming into the future, the farmland on both the north and south sides of Marsh Lake Road are taxed as green acres. As such, we intend to insist that any assessment be deferred pursuant to Green Acres law. That is the end of the statement. With that, let me open it up to the council. We'll start with the council members on the phone. Judy, questions or comments?
Yes, I believe that they should not be assessed. This is a connector road. It's not a private residence road. We're building that road because of us growing that way and making it convenient for everyone in the city and surrounding cities to use the road. I don't think that we should be doing this. By assessing this, not only are you creating a situation where the Laketown Township is not, that side of the road is not going to want to ever be a part of Victoria to keep from getting assessed. I just don't think it's the right thing to do. So I don't think we should do it.
Can you clarify your comments? You said they. Who is they?
The people on the south end, the south side of Marsh Lake Road would not get their assessment until after they were annexed over into Victoria. How are we going to be able to get the south side of Marsh Lake Road to want to come to Victoria if we're going to assess them thousands of dollars? This is a connector road. It's for the city of Victoria, and these people should not be having to pay the price. That's my opinion.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Gregory?
Could I have someone explain the Green Acre ordinance not being assessment under the Green Acre ordinance?
Green Acre, I looked it up.
Hang on, Bob, do you, can you speak to the Green Acres law? Do you know anything about that? I don't want to.
Yeah, Mayor and Council. Yeah, no, not at all. Mayor and Council, yeah, I'm generally familiar with the law. I didn't review it, obviously, immediately prior to tonight, but basically what the Schmiegs are indicating is the case. That is that their assessment wouldn't be, they wouldn't be obligated to start paying on an assessment under the Green Acres law. That's correct. The comment seems to make it sound like it's discretionary, like it would be up to the city council whether or not you're going to give them that benefit or not. The statute actually answers that question. I mean, it just says you can't collect the assessment while they're in the Green Acres program. So there isn't any decision for the council to make. They are just not obligated to pay. And I'm hedging a little bit because I don't know if the Green Acres law treats the assessment as having been levied against the property and interest is accruing, or if the law treats the assessment as not yet having been levied and thus interest is not yet accruing. I don't recall that off the top of my head. But putting aside that detail, they would not be making payments of the assessment as long as the property remained in the Green Acres program.
All right, thank you, Bob. Councilmember Gregory, does that answer your question?
It does, but if you continue, if the Schmiegs per se were to continue farming in excess of 15 years, would that then nullify the assessment? Because the assessment would have to be paid within the 15 years.
Is that a question for Bob?
Right. If they're operating under the Green Acres law and they can't be assessed until they're not in the Green Acres law, but if they continue farming for more than 15 years, that would eliminate any assessments for them. Is that what you're saying?
Mayor, Council, Bob Vos, my understanding is the answer to that question is no. You can't run out the clock on an assessment by remaining in the Green Acres program, is my recollection. To the extent you want to confirm that, I'd have to read the statute, but my recollection is that no, you would not invalidate by staying in the program past the initial term of the repayment schedule. you wouldn't, in effect, run the clock out on the assessments.
Okay, thanks. And then further comments. I mean, no one likes assessments. I struggle with these every time I have to look at them. And I know they can be hardships on people, but at the same time, we've assessed everyone. Most residents of Victoria had incurred some sort of assessment at some point or another. And even though, granted, we wouldn't be building this road if it wasn't for us expanding in this area, those folks wouldn't be assessed, and that is true. But I think the same could be said with many of our streets. I struggle with this, but anxious to hear other comments. I'll pass the buck.
All right, thanks. Councilmember Vogt.
First of all, a couple of different comments going back to the project scope. As I understand that this road that we're going to make some motions on tonight is a complete new road built from the ground up. In the scope, there's the word restoration. Can you clarify that, Kara?
Sure, Councilmember Vogt, members of the City Council. That refers to putting grass seed back down adjacent to the roadway because, you know, it's not a wide area that'll get disturbed, but a small area adjacent to the road will get disturbed and need to be restored with topsoil and
okay, good. I think I'd prefer to, if you had in restoration of the adjacent area or something. But anyway, thanks for that clarification. Getting to the issues on the assessment. Assessments are distasteful, but unavoidable. We've whittled the cost of this road down millions and millions of dollars already to where we have a road that is about the minimum road we can build. So, I mean, everybody's getting a good deal on this. And I just want to remind everybody, and Bob Vos, jump in if I'm wrong, when it comes time to bring in more land from the township to acquire more acreage, it's going to be the decision of the city council. And we're not going to take a poll of all the people that are working out there as to whether they want to come into the city or not. So we're going to be doing it for the common good of the area that we know will end up being Victoria. So there's not going to be a poll taken, and we're not going to give people outs and that sort of thing. When the time comes to take another big block of Laketown Township, we will have to move forward. So I think discussion of, you know, making exceptions is counterproductive. You know, this road is going to make things better for everybody, even the farmers. Everything's going to be better. It's going to be cleaner. The noise is going to be less. It's good. So to me, I'm not for any discussions of making special exceptions on assessments, because I think Kara has given it quite a bit of thought already and has looked at what we've done in the past. That's it.
All right, thank you. Councilmember McMillan?
I would be in agreement with Councilmember Vogt and Councilmember Gregory. I think we move forward with the feasibility study and call for the hearing.
Anything else?
Nope.
Thank you. And I agree. Nobody likes the assessments, but everybody else in this city has been assessed when their roads have been done, and people that live on Marsh Lake Road will benefit from a paved road, washboarding and everything else. So to Schmig's point, the law already protects them. The annexation, we don't force annexation, it's voluntary. So whenever they decide that they want to sell and become part of Victoria, it's only then when the assessment actually hits them. So it's not going to force them to do anything now. But yeah, we don't make exceptions. Everybody else pays theirs also. So Is there any further discussion, council? If not, can I get a motion, please?
This is Councilmember McMillan. I make a motion that we approve the resolution receiving and accepting the feasibility report and calling for hearing on Marsh Lake Road improvements.
Public hearing.
Public hearing.
Thank you. Can I get a second, please?
Councilmember Vogt, second motion.
Thank you. Roll call vote. Councilmember Black.
No.
Thank you. Councilmember Gregory.
Aye.
Councilmember Vogt.
Aye.
Councilmember McMillan.
Aye.
I vote aye. Motion carries 4-1. Councilmember Black, the lone dissent. Kara, is that all you needed on this item?
That is all I needed, Mayor. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next item up. Ann, are you there? Hopefully she's there and unmuting. The last item on tonight's agenda, 7.4, Parks and Recreation Department COVID-19 update and operations planning.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. This evening, I want to talk a little bit about the Parks and Recreation Department. And as we move forward with planning for our recreation programs, some of the parks and facilities that we have in the community, and then also the recreation center, as we move forward with the COVID impacts and our planning process. The Parks and Recreation Department, I think, is probably the most customer-facing department within the city. We offer a lot of recreation programs, both large and small special events, and then also the recreation center with all its membership and guests that we have coming forward. We have been tracking, and it was a great presentation by Dr. Scott this evening. We've been trying to keep tabs on the status of reopening the state and what that means for the Parks and Recreation Department. And we also are on a weekly call with the other recreation departments throughout the state weekly, just trying to get a feel for what they're doing, and it's a great place to get ideas on what types of programming that might be out there that we would be able to participate in. As you know, the governor's order closed us on March 16th, I believe it was, and that pretty much shut everything down for us. But with our summer programs, we have a lot of programming and work that goes on behind the scenes to offer those, including staff, which we have froze all staff hirings. We have purchased no product or materials for our programs. So as we move forward, trying to kind of pin a date down without knowing exactly what's going to happen. And again, I think these are going to be some fluid times and things will change, but our recommendation coming forward to the council tonight will be to cancel at least all of our large programs. That includes T-ball and playgrounds, and all of our larger events, as well as our special events, including concerts in the park, movies in the park, our Yappy Hour and other special events, so, and canceling those until at least July 6th. We are continuing to evaluate and monitor some of our smaller programs with the hope that we could offer those virtually, and in the event that the governor opens up some of the restrictions, that some of those smaller programs that we could have those outside or in smaller rooms if allowed to do that. So that's for the recreation programs. And now I'm going to move on to the parks. Currently, all our parks, playgrounds, fields, and courts are all open to the public, and we encourage them to go out and use them while maintaining social distancing, of course. And early on, we had some calls from residents, but those have dwindled a little bit. My concern moving forward is when with the weather, like today was a beautiful day, when the weather starts getting really nice and people are itching to go out, that could pose a problem moving forward, but it's something that we will continue to monitor. We are going to propose our community gardens open in May with social distancing requirements. We're looking at staggering times that people can come to those gardens, like with odd even plots, just to prevent larger gatherings there. For all our other facilities, meaning all our shelter rentals, pavilion rentals, any large youth or adult sports that use facilities, we are looking to keep those closed as well until at least July 6th. One of the things that is a little bit outside our control, but I think that the council should discuss, are classic car events or large Lions events. I know we had a request from the Lions Club to hold a community event either in May or June. So that's something that the council, I think, should discuss, those events that are not specifically sponsored by the city. Does anybody have any questions on parks and recreation before I move into the rec center?
Council?
No, I'm good.
Go ahead and move on.
Perfect. Perfect. So at the Recreation Center, we closed on March 6th, and all memberships were suspended at that point in time. With about a week in after closing, we were able to get virtual fitness classes up and running. And that first month, we had about 320 participants, and we activated 18 memberships during that time. For the month of May, we're looking to add more fitness classes, and that would allow us to potentially activate some additional memberships that have classes included in them if members chose to do that or partake in it. So I know that our contract fitness instructors are eager to add some more classes, and we've gotten a little bit of feedback from members that have those classes that they would like to see us add more. We're currently only offering 8 during the week, and at full strength, I think we'd be up into about 15 classes per week. So that's one thing that we are looking at. One of the questions that the council answered early on was the suspension of the memberships, and we are recommending the continuation of all the memberships until the rec center can reopen safely. Just doing a quick run of math for memberships, I'm anticipating we're losing about $15,500 to $17,500 a month in revenue just from memberships, gym rental, and room rental. And as we move into the summer months, usually that gym and room rental goes down because of people wanting to be outside. One of the other things that we wanted to continue working on that Dr. Scott spoke about was reopening facilities per state and federal guidelines. There's a recommendation to develop a plan, a phased plan, and keep making sure that we keep safe staff, keep our members and guest staff or guests within the facility safe. And so we really want to start working towards that. Just some of the items that we've started to look at are installing safety screen at the front desk, adding sanitation stations throughout the facility, additional signage, and then purchasing of additional cleaning and safety products. Just doing a quick investigation of trying to get some of those things. We're several weeks, if not a good month or two out before we can even get some of those things. So I'd really like to get working on it now in hopes that we'd have it available when we are ready to open into that phased approach with opening the recreation center. Within your packet, I included some information from other communities and what they are doing. And, you know, unfortunately, nobody has ever had to plan for a pandemic like this, at least that I'm aware of. So communities are really working closely together to try to determine how they're going to prepare and what they're doing. And a lot of communities right now have pushed things out to July. Some have canceled summer programs and events in their entirety. And a lot of communities I know have moved or canceled special events such as concerts in the park. I know 4th of July season festivals are getting moved, and they're pushing those out to the fall, at least for the time being. And like I said, it's a very fluid time, and we're trying to monitor and update changes as we get them. And as we move forward with planning, we will implement those items as we go forward. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. I have put a proposed motion up for you to consider. And then the one other thing that I would like to get some feedback on from you is community events that are not sponsored by the city, just to provide and help them with provide direction as well. So with that, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ann. Council, let's start with the second question, and that is community events not organized by the city. I think the guidance should be simple. We need to comply with the orders that are out there. And that is our facility, right?
Yes.
The Lions Club and the Pavilion, that's our facility. So we basically can say, no, that's shut down. You can't do an event. Now, what the Lions Club does on their own, they can do stuff on their own. They just can't use the pavilion. Correct?
And then there's the car show, which I don't see where they would have a problem not doing it. I mean, it's mandated by the governor.
No, I think everybody wants to do it, but we just can't. Nobody's open anyway. So, council, is it fair to say that the pavilion, the city-owned pavilion, will remain closed? And then the Lions Club, I mean, they can do whatever they want. If they want to have an event, that's their business.
We should talk about the whole facility. Is the entire Lions Park the city's facility? Is that a yes coming from staff?
Yes.
Yes.
This is Ann. Yep.
Okay, so then we have to be careful that the Lions understand that we're talking about the whole facility, not just the pavilion.
So I see what you're saying.
So we need to make guidelines for the ball fields and everything else that's over there.
So to me, I think it's just the facility is closed, just like our parks are open. If somebody wants to go over and use the ball field and they stay within the social distancing guidelines, they can go ahead and do that.
I agree. I mean, they're golfing out here.
Right.
Whatever they do 6 feet away.
I don't think it's any more complicated than if they want to use the facilities, they can like anybody else. They just.
So are the basketball fields, the basketball courts, that's a city facility?
Right, and people were out there playing just the other day.
And is that part of Lions Park, or is it a separate park?
That is part of Lions Park.
So how do we feel about playing basketball where you have pretty close proximity?
Go ahead, Deb.
It says all parks, playgrounds, fields, and courts are open.
Okay.
So I think we should let it be open.
Be consistent.
Yeah, community gardens are open. Yeah.
Yeah. all of that. I think the concern comes in the classic car show is such a great event, and it's so painful to say that that couldn't go on. I would encourage the organizers to just consider those maybe one by one as things are starting to open up, and you know, if we feel like we have enough space, or maybe they have ideas around limiting cars or limiting some other kind of way to keep that going, but do it in a safe way. I think we let them make their decision kind of on a case as they come up. So I think they typically schedule about 8 of those throughout the summer, 6 or 8 of those throughout the summer.
Yeah, there's 8, but I mean, how do you allow a car show with groups smaller than 10?
Yeah, well, you know.
Which is, I think,
So
yeah, I think we just have to wait until the governor says it's okay.
Right, but to Deb's point, I think we would all agree that as soon as the governor lifts the restrictions and some of these events can go on, we're full speed ahead on getting them done.
I would be reluctant to say, let's wipe them all off the calendar for the entire year, see what happens.
And Mr. Mayor and the council, I am only recommending those things until July 6th, and then evaluate again after that to see where we are with the governor's lifting of restrictions.
That seems reasonable. This is McMillan. That seems reasonable to me.
And I would agree. And I think we can actually, in the motion here, as I'm reading it, we can always add in here that if the governor eases the restrictions, we will comply with those, right? If you read the actual motion that's proposed, right, we can always go with the July 6th date that Ann proposed, and then if something changes, well, then we'll just put it on the schedule and go. I don't think anybody would hesitate. Council on the phone, comments, questions?
I would agree with
nothing further.
Proposal.
Okay, so Judy, anything else? I heard from council members, both Toms. Judy, anything else to add?
Do you want me to read the proposal?
Yeah, go ahead. If you want to make a motion, go ahead.
Approve recreation center memberships continue to be suspended until the facility opens or when members request activation for virtual or live fitness classes, and prepare the recreation center for a phased reopening on a date to be determined that complies with state and federal guidelines, and approve the Parks and Recreation Department's proposed COVID-19 plan for programs and facilities, and provide refunds for registrants and rentals.
Thank you. Can I get a second, please?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councilmember McMillan. Roll call vote. Judy?
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Gregory?
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Vogt?
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember McMillan?
Aye.
And the mayor votes aye. That's unanimous. Motion carries unanimously. Let me just repeat. I'm tired.
Yeah.
It's been 5 hours. Ann, is that all you needed then?
That's it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yep, thank you. That completes the agenda. We're now on to roundtable. Council members, any items for the roundtable? Hearing none, I'll move to reports. Bob, any reports? He may be working with Marty. I'm assuming no report.
Yeah, no report, Mayor. Apologies. Nothing to report.
No, not a problem. No apology necessary. Dana? Council, Judy, any reports? Judy? Any reports?
Are we done?
Oh, you're muted.
All of a sudden, everything's, oh,
I could see you talking.
no report.
Did we lose Judy?
No,
All right, I'm going to assume no report.
Yep, she said
Yeah,
no
you're
report.
breaking up. All right, thank you. We're starting to lose it up here, apparently. Councilmember Gregory? Yeah.
I'm right here.
Maybe that's not the best
Can
way
you
to
hear
phrase
me?
that.
More ways than one.
Says I'm on.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Councilmember Vogt?
No report.
Thank you. Councilmember McMillan?
No, sir.
I know we're all tired. I've got a very brief report, but I think you'll all appreciate this. On behalf of the City Council, I would like to thank Acrylic Design Associates and Bill McNeely for donating 1,000 face shields to the Victoria Fire Department. The department did not have any face shields, and this was much needed and appreciated. So to Bill McNeely and Acrylic Design, thank you very much. I heard we were one of 2 cities that he donated to, ourselves and Plymouth. So very fortunate. And again, thank you, Bill McNeely and Acrylic Designs. I'd also like to thank J. Carver Distillery for their generous donation of hand sanitizer. These donations are very much appreciated by our city staff, who are also on the front lines working to provide vital services to our residents. The pandemic has affected all businesses, and what's truly remarkable about these 2 companies is that neither J. Carver Distilleries nor Acrylic Design Associates are located in Victoria, but still donated to help keep our staff safe when providing the services to the public. So that makes it extra special as far as I'm concerned. So again, on behalf of the Victoria City Council, our residents, I want to thank you, Bill McNeely and Acrylic Design Associates, and thank you, J. Carver Distillery, for going beyond your borders. Your thoughtfulness and generosity during this time is truly heartwarming and very much appreciated. So thank you very much. With that, I have nothing else. The council, yeah, here, exactly. Council, can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
Motion to adjourn.
I second that motion.
Quick roll call vote, and I hope nobody objects. Judy?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we're having enough trouble hearing her. Councilmember Gregory?
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Vogt?
Aye.
Thank you. Deb?
Aye.
And the mayor votes aye. We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.